Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We've got another Friday live chat, live stream going on. Summer is fast approaching, Alexander. It is hot over here. How are you doing in London?
Well, it's slightly cold, but it's beautifully sunny and bright, and definitely there's a sense of spring around, and maybe that accounts for some of the interesting election results we're getting around the country, but which we're going to be discussing today. But certainly, as you know, it's been a sunny, beautiful day in London at the moment, and apparently most of the UK too.
Super Thursday, yeah.
Super Thursday. We've had elections, many elections. All the elections, the regional, the local elections that were supposed to happen last year were put back to this year because of the pandemic. So we've got a huge number of local elections taking place. We've got elections for mayors in London and various towns and cities across England. We have elections for the Scottish and Welsh assemblies. And of course, we've also had that now famous by-election in Hartlepool, which we are no doubt going to talk about a lot. But this is a very, very big election day in the UK, and it has given us a very, very clear insight of what the British people think about the state of politics in their country. And one particular party has been given a very, very strong lesson, which it gives every sign of not wanting to learn.
All right, so hold on to those insights, guys. We're going to take some calls as the show progresses as well. We'll put the link in the live stream in the chat. Spartan Warrior Queen is with us moderating, the great Spartan Warrior Queen. Thank you very much, Spartan Warrior Queen, for joining us on this live stream and for helping us out. Everyone that is joining us as well, thank you very much. Valley S comes through to open up the show with a $40 super chat. Thank you very much. Valley S kicking things off for this live stream. Wherever you are joining us from, we hope you're having a great day. Look for us on Locals. Look for us on the new platform, Super U. Go to the Duran shop and put the code REALNEWS in checkout and you will get 10% off all the merch. Greetings, Kasser from Turkey. Great to have you here with us. Alan Watson is in the house. Harvardian. Kalimera in Greek. Very good. How are you doing? David Williams, good to have you with us. Let's see. Elizaveta, how are you doing? Elizaveta in the house. Alexander from Serbia with us. Let's see. From Essex, UK. Good morning to the US. St. Louis. All right, Alexander, let's jump right into it because I know you have a lot of stuff that you want to cover. So, Alexander, the whole world is joining us. Irish partisan in Belarus. How are you? Alexander Bryan kicking it in with a €10 super chat. Thank you very much, Brian. Alexander, UK elections, Super Thursday. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is that the Labour Party is losing in pretty much every part of the United Kingdom. I mean, it elected Keir Starmer as its leader to win back the Red Wall. And that was a bizarre decision because, of course, the reason Labour lost the Red Wall, all those seats in Northern England and in the Midlands, working class seats, once the core of the party's support, the reason it lost them in the December 2019 election, well, you could come up with all sorts of big historic reasons, but there was undoubtedly and unquestionably one overarching one, and that is that all the people in these seats overwhelmingly voted leave in the Brexit referendum of 2016. And they were very, very unhappy, to put it mildly, with the fact that the Labour Party, under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, went into the December 2019 election saying that instead of carrying out leave, they would have a second referendum, reopening the whole topic again. So, of course, all those working class voters in all of those constituencies were completely unimpressed, and they either didn't vote or they voted Conservative. The Conservatives, of course, promising in the election to get Brexit done. So, what does the Labour Party do in response to that? It elects Keir Starmer as the Labour leader, Keir Starmer the arch Remainer, Keir Starmer the person who, more than any other single Labour politician, is associated with the various parliamentary tactics that took place in 2019 to derail Brexit. Keir Starmer, the person who supported the second referendum idea, that disastrous second referendum idea, who went behind Jeremy Corbyn's back at a Labour Party conference to announce that that second referendum would include an option to remain in the European Union. So they chose him as their leader, and they expected that that would cause them to win back all those Leave votes in Northern England and in Central England. It's a most bizarre decision. And to compound it, they then chose for their candidate in this seat, Hartlepool, where there was a parliamentary by-election, a seat, a working class constituency, where 70% of the people voted Leave in the Brexit referendum. They chose an arch Remainer who doesn't even live in the constituency and who had previously lost a parliamentary election in a neighbouring town, Stockport. So, I mean, again, it's bizarre that they don't seem to get this. Even now, they don't seem to understand that they elected completely the wrong leader to address the problems that they face in that particular part of England and that belt of working class constituencies in Central England and in Northern England. And what instead they've been trying to do is that they've been saying to these working class voters, well, despite being, militant Remainers, we're patriotic, we believe in the army, we support the flag, we do all of those things, which is, of course, profoundly manipulative and patronizing and impresses no one. And at the same time, they have been demoralizing by following those tactics, their sort of young base in the university towns and in London, which is as a result completely demoralized. So they have been making every conceivable mistake. Now, it is obvious, it is unsurprising, it is bizarre that they don't see it. And I've been listening to the commentary that's been pouring out of the Labour Party over the course of today, and they still don't get it. And they still persist in making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So instead of going forward, they're going backward, and they're going to continue to go backward. I think this is an existential moment, by the way, for the Labour Party. I think if they continue like this for much longer, and by the way, I think they will, then I suspect that come the next election, we will see these results reproduce themselves, and the Labour Party will finally and irretrievably collapse. That seems to me the trajectory of travel, and it baffles me. It completely leaves me incredulous that the Labour leadership simply doesn't get it.
Okay, Scotland, Wales, London. What's going on? Pick your order. Pick your order, which one you want to tackle.
Right, we don't have full results there. The first result from Wales is of a Conservative gain. Wales also voted Leave. So again, it's unsurprising that this is happening. Well, Wales is a very, very left-wing part of the United Kingdom. Labour Party has very deep roots there. The Labour Party controls the local government. I suspect it will hold on, but I suspect its support is going to be eroded. In Scotland, the Labour Party is now completely marginal. It barely functions in Scotland as a significant political force. The entire battle is between various nationalist factions which are pursuing independence, and the opposition to them is increasingly becoming the Conservatives. In London, we shall see. London is the place where Labour has recently been strongest. It's been the most strong pro-Remain section of England. So we'll see what happens there. And I would add also, it's got a very large immigrant population. And up to now, the only part of Britain's, of the Labour electoral constituency that is still largely sticking by Labour are the immigrant voters, especially the immigrant voters from the former Commonwealth. So, from the Commonwealth, from Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Caribbean, and the rest. So we'll see how it does. But the latest indications in London, and these are very tentative and they may prove to be wrong, is that even there, Labour is falling back, partly because the sort of activist left-wing base that you tend to find amongst people in London is, for entirely different reasons, also disillusioned with Starmer's leadership. So, they're losing ground everywhere, and they will continue to do so. And I think the situation in the party is so bad now that I don't see this turning round.
Is there a second party outside of Labour?
Well,
conservative Labour's, I mean, what's the landscape in the UK? Are there other parties?
I mean, there are other parties. There's the Green Party, which is picking up votes. There's the Liberal Democrats, which are also picking up votes in various places. But I think the Liberal Democrats have a ceiling. I don't think they will break through that. And I don't think they're coming back in any significant way. That's my own feeling. The Labour Party and the Conservative Party have, for most of British post-war history, since the Second World War, formed an effective duopoly. You don't really have an alternative on the left to Labour. Possibly in time, the Green Party may become that. But I'm glad you brought this up, because this is, for me, the actual danger. If the Labour Party implodes, the big beneficiaries are going to be the Conservatives. They will become not just the biggest party in Britain, they will become the overwhelmingly dominant party in Britain. The temptation for the Conservatives in that case will be to tack to the left so as to govern from the centre, to freeze out any revival of a sort of more left-wing party on the left, gambling that they will hold on to their support on the right. And that is the high road to Merkelism, to the kind of system that Angela Merkel created in Germany. And we've seen where that leads to. It leads to incoherent government, to stagnation of policy, to complacency, to ultimately to decay, and eventually a breakdown of the political system, and a very fragmented political system, which is what we now have in Germany. So that, it seems to me, is the long-term risk. But, I mean, that's 10, 20 years into the future. At the moment, Labour is committing suicide. I'm sorry to put it as bluntly as that, but that's, it seems to me, what it's doing. I mean, listening to the sort of bloody-minded commentaries that are coming out from some people in the Labour Party is astonishing. It's committing suicide, and the Conservatives are emerging as the absolutely dominant party in England. In Scotland, it's different. I mean, there's a nationalist challenge there. Wales might prove to be different also. London has its own complexities. But across England, the Conservatives are just sweeping the board.
What does this mean for Boris Johnson?
Well, we were discussing very recently in a program the fact that there seemed to be a plot against him being organized on the part of some people in the Conservative Party. And by the way, I not only believe that, I've been told informally that it's probably true. That, in fact, this was an orchestrated attempt to leverage him out. If so, then that plot has failed, because given the collapse of the Labour Party, the Conservatives have no reason at the moment to dispense with Johnson. So I think Johnson is safe. Eventually, plotting will resume in the Conservative Party. It always does. And no doubt eventually he will be find that he's been maneuvered out. But at the moment, I think he's safe and secure, because why should the Conservatives change their leader at this time when things right across the country are going their way?
Mm-hmm. Scotland, Alexander, what does this mean for referendum? What do you think is going to happen there? Because I've read that things are starting to actually shift away from having a referendum.
I think this is true. I think you're starting to see a Conservative revival in Scotland. Now, that is, by the way, remarkable, because the Conservative Party began to lose support in Scotland way back in the 1950s. And in the 1990s, what was left of Conservative support finally collapsed. And it was the Labour Party at that time, by the way, which was the dominant party in Scotland. But what has happened is that the Labour Party has collapsed in Scotland. It's, by the way, a very similar Labour Party now to the Labour Party in England. It's collapsed in Scotland. There are now various nationalist factions who are fighting it out. And the unionist vote, the vote of the people who want to keep Scotland in the United Kingdom, seems to be consolidating around the Conservatives. In which case, if unionist sentiment in Scotland continues to strengthen, and there's been some indications over the last few weeks and months that it is, then we could start to see a rise in Conservative support in Scotland and a decline in support for the nationalist parties. Now, that will be a total reversal of the entire trajectory of Scottish politics ever since the 1950s. It's perhaps too early at the moment to say that that is happening, but we are starting to see the first hints and indications that things are moving in that direction.
Who's the guy running against Khan in London?
Oh, I mean, there's various people.
Who's the front runner? I was reading about.
Yeah, I mean, there's talk about a person called Sean Berry, who is the Green candidate. But there's also I feel I've even forgotten the Conservative candidate's name. He was not an impressive person. The Conservatives win London, by the way.
Did they give up on London, the Conservatives, you think? Is that
well,
why?
I virtually think so. I think they realise that London is such a difficult territory for them that they're not really going to make a big breakthrough there. And we'll see how well they do and how well the Greens do. The Greens are expected to do reasonably well in London. London has a completely different politics. By the way, that's part of the problem. Because if you look at the leadership of the Labour Party, it is dominated by London people. Corbyn, who was the previous leader, was, of course, a London MP. So was MacDonald, who was his Chancellor. So was Diane Abbott, who was his Home Secretary. And so, of course, is Keir Starmer. Not just London, but a particular part of London, North London, which, by the way, is the part of London where I happen to live, and which is Remainer central. I mean, it's exactly the kind of place where you would find all the sort of people who are who are Remainers, who have certain views about identity matters, who do all those kind of things. And if you want to get an idea of their kind of viewpoint, the place to go is The Guardian, the Guardian newspaper, which is an accurate reflection of their point of view. You can also, by the way, go to the New York Times, and you'll find that that the opinions expressed there are very similar to sort of opinions you'd find amongst people in North London. They are not typical at all of opinions across the rest of Britain. And that's, I think, part of the Labour Party's problem. It is very, very much led by people who belong to a North London bubble. By the way, even Tony Blair, who was an MP whose constituency was actually in the north of England, but he too was very, very London-centric in his outlook, and his policies and the direction he took the Labour Party were also extremely London-centric.
All right. Let's see here. Let's do a couple super chats, take some calls. I dropped the link in there. I'll drop the link in again into the chat. And let's do some questions, actually. Do you think, and this actually falls in line with London, from Wardy Boy 69, do you think Sean Bailey will win London? The polling was way off.
Well, it's possible, but I think it's unlikely, to be quite honest. At the moment, and I've just checked, it looks as if Sadiq Khan is ahead. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. London, as I said, has a different politics. The question, I think, is less whether Sadiq Khan will win. By the way, I should make it clear, he is not somebody I'm would vote for, but or dare I say it, have voted for. But the reality is that in a place like London, he must be the most likely person to win. So the question for me is not whether he will win, it's how much or whether his support will slip. Bear in mind that London was the only place in the United Kingdom where the Labour Party held its ground in the 2019 election.
Yeah. From Joel, have you guys heard about the Finns might stop EU? Yes, I got your email, Joel, about Finland and the EU. We'll probably do a show on that.
We will do a show.
Story.
We will do a show on it, actually. I mean, I'm not up to date in it. I mean, I was spending most of the night following the election results, which came out very slowly. I mean, Hartlepool came out early in the morning here, late in the morning here by our standards. Vote counting has been very slow, perhaps because there's been so much of it to do.
Yeah, and let's do 2 more super chats, Alexander. Three more super chats, and we'll get to calls. And this one is from, one second here, from Mark Hewitt. But who could Labour elect as leader? Rebecca Wong Daly, Lisa Woke Nandy, the only one with Carolyn Flint, and she lost her seat in the general election.
I think you put a wonderful point, actually, because to be straightforward about it, I haven't a clue. I've been looking at the Labour leadership. I mean, this is another problem that Labour has. I mean, they have an absolute dearth of effective people. The quality of people that the Labour Party has and is in a position to put up is terrible. None of them look remotely convincing. None of them look in any way conceivably like they could sort of build a coalition, reach out across the country, bridge the gap between metropolitan voters in, say, places like London and Manchester and those sort of places, and at the same time reach out to working class voters in North and Central England. I know of not one person in the Labour Party who's remotely up to doing that. And by the way, I'm glad you brought up the topic of woke, because again, this attempt by some people in the Labour Party to play up the identity issues is to try to transfer to Britain the kind of politics that the Democrats use in the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
But Britain isn't like that. Culture is different here. I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of people in Britain who are open to that sort of thing, but there's not enough of them to win an election. Nowhere close. So, I mean, it's again, emphasizing that issue means that you're going to win a lot of votes from the 20-somethings, who are the smallest demographic that makes up the British electorate, and no one else. In fact, if you go to some places in England, in working class areas, which used to be very strong for the Labour Party, and you start talking in that way, well, you'll see that the reception you get will not be a friendly one. Be careful what I say.
Valies says, Alexander, how about you running for London mayor?
Oh, well, believe it or not, I used to once upon a time, long ago, belong to a party. I'm not going to say which one, by the way. And they did ask me at one point to become a candidate, and I said no. I thought that I would not be the right person for it. And that's a decision, by the way, which I have never regretted. Certainly now. I mean, really. I mean, it would be impossible anyway. I mean, that's a fantastic idea, and it has no appeal to me at all.
Yeah, well, after the shows that we do on the Duran, I think the politicians would not be happy to
absolutely.
around.
And can I just I'm glad you bring that up, because I far more enjoy doing the Duran than doing that sort of thing. I mean, the idea of going around becoming mayor of London and trying to even running for mayor of London. I mean, it's unspeakably awful. I know people in politics, by the way. I know people in politics in all of the major parties, especially, both of the two big parties. And I know what kind of lives they lead, and I have no wish to participate in any of that. And anyway, I mean, that option, if it existed ever, which I'm not sure it ever did, has well and truly closed, and I don't regret it.
All right, 2 super chats here that we'll do. We'll get the calls. Bring back the wigs from JJHW.
Yeah, well,
super chat.
Well, the Whigs ran Britain, England, in the 18th and early 19th century, and they did it very well in some ways. I mean, you know, you've got to quarrel with them on some things. I mean, they were the people who basically created the British Empire, an institution which I do not regret at all, by the way, and which I think did things that I'm not going to discuss because that's a different topic, but which I would never justify. But in terms of how they ran England itself, well, you could say they gave an effective government. So, you know, bring them back by all means.
All right, guys, hit that like, everybody. Smash that like. Let's get to, we're at 255. Let's get to 500. Hit that like if you haven't yet. And from Moon Swan Silverlight, hey, lads, been a while since I last caught your live streams. Haven't been getting notifications lately, so I have missed a lot, but I'm here now. Well, it is great to have you here with us, and we fully understand the fact that you're not getting notifications.
Absolutely.
From our friends at YouTube.
Absolutely, yeah.
But locals, Super U, Odyssey, that is where we are going to be putting a lot of focus into. So make sure to check us out. And Super U is a new platform, completely free speech. We're going to be talking about a lot of good stuff there, guys. And on locals as well. We'll be talking about a lot of good stuff on locals. So stuff that we can't talk about here. So keep posted, and the links are underneath this video as well. I'll post them actually in the live stream as well. And let's get to some calls. Alexander, think we should get to some calls?
Absolutely, let's do so. With pleasure.
All right, let's bring in Alan Watson to kick it off. Alan, you're live. Are you with us, Alan? You're muted. Your mic is muted. Now your mic is unmuted. Can you hear us, Alan? Alan, going once, going twice. We'll bring you back in, Alan. We'll bring you back in. All right, we'll bring Alan back in. Let's go to Google Whistleblower. Tarif,
how you doing?
You're live.
Man? Yeah,
good. How are you? Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh man, that was quick. I thought I'd be the fifth person, but okay, here I go. Let me okay, free Julian Assange, of course. I want to talk about 2 comments, and I think they're important, especially the last one because I brought it up about 2 or 3 weeks ago. First comment, you know, now you got this vaccine passports and everything like that.
Be careful. Be careful with the words you use because YouTube takes down, not for any reason. It's just that YouTube takes down the video. I mean, they like take it down. So just
okay.
Yeah.
I got to come up with a clever way of saying it then.
Yeah.
Okay. Bernie Sanders came out, which I might have to share this article with y'all on your Discord, that Bernie Sanders is not a fan, is not in favor of requiring students to get, you fill in the blank, right? And I think it's a good thing because now they're talking about 12 and 15 years old kids, which is they are low risk. I'm not against that, you know, the blank. I'm not against it. I'm for it, but I don't think we should give up certain rights. You know what I'm saying? One day I might get it. If I can get the Chinese or Sputnik V one, I get that. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to just stay healthy. Okay, so I'm going to leave that topic alone because it's too, it might mess with the algorithm. So I'm going to leave that topic alone. I'm going to go straight into...
It's a hot topic, but just, you know what, Tarif, just to let you know that we will be doing live streams on Super U as well.
Absolutely.
We will be able to talk about these things.
Yes.
So, yeah, just that's a good actually heads up and a good segue for everyone that's watching this stream. We will be doing lives on Super U going forward as well, and we'll be able to talk about what you want to talk about as well with your comments. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, yeah, and I apologize because I know better. I forgot. I don't know why, but I forgot. But anyway, my second comment is dealing with the Arizona audit. Um, they started the process of auditing the votes now, and I come to find out, I followed this woman. She's part of the Combo Counts. It's her, Nico, and some other people, and also they also want Julian Assange to be released too, to do good reports on Bernie Sanders and Julian Assange and what's going on in the United States. So she went to the place where they doing accounting. Her name is Florella Isabel, and she have a long thread that y'all should read. Don't worry, I'm gonna share it to your Discord so everybody can see. And she have a long thread about what she's observing at the audit. She says basically, they have security there, making sure nobody is trying to mess with the ballots, anything like that. And you have people that's counting the ballots, that's Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians, and Independents. And she just goes through her thread, and what she's saying is that Dominion has refused to give the auditors the passwords to the logs, which will show any computer interceptions, router access, which will check for a connection from the tabulation machines to the internet on election night. This is an essential part of a full forensic audit. So Dominion is refusing to give the password to these people, even though the judge allowing the auditors to go through it. And she also came up and said, well, she's going to write an article on this subject. Another concern from the auditors is that they have not received signatures from the mail-in ballot envelopes. The excuse makes zero sense. Allegations that the sensitive data could endanger the lives of the enforcement personnel, which don't make no sense. So even though they got access to the ballots, but the Maricopa County, let me see what county, Maricopa Elections Department is holding some of the information from the auditors. So it's something's going on. Well, I mean, people are happy that it's taking place, but they're holding key information back from the auditors. Then the judge already ruled that they have the right to audit the ballots. So it's like they're trying to slow down the process. So I hope the circuit judge or maybe even the Supreme Court may have to jump into this and force these people to give up the data, because this is not right. So I mean, and she's not Florella Isabel. She's a journalist, activist, pro freedom of speech, and she's a lefty. Okay, and the reason why she's covering this, and other people like her that's on the left that's covering this, is because, in my opinion, is this. When I heard Tim Condova that was cheated in southern Florida by Debbie Rushman Schultz, he said her staff cheated him from the election. What's going on is this. If you can stop election fraud, no matter on who, then when the progressives run, they have a better chance of beating the DNC back candidate. So it affects everybody. And this how they stole the election from Bernie Sanders, right? They did the same thing to Bernie Sanders like they did the same thing to Tim Condova. They did the same thing. You know what? I messed up again. I don't want to say stole. Oh my God!
I think, Tariff, if I can say, I think we understand exactly what the point you're driving at, and I think we can also. I'm going to make a few quick observations, if I may. I'm sorry to just, but this is obviously tricky territory. But sometimes the most powerful weapon in litigation is discovery, or what we in England call disclosure. This is the situation where a judge requires one of the parties to disclose all the information that they have, which is relevant to the case. And quite often, one finds that as a result of that disclosure process, all sorts of interesting and rather useful things come out, which sometimes have bearing that go far beyond the case itself, which is under discussion. Now, that may happen in this case. It possibly will and the case itself is important. But I will say this, please don't have great expectations of any legal process that goes on this topic in the United States. I have followed all of these cases with great attention right from the moment they first started. I said to myself on numerous occasions that it was inconceivable that they would not result in not necessarily a particular outcome, but in certain procedural steps being taken. And I was always disappointed in the end. At the moment when it looked as if something was about to happen, it never did. So perhaps this will be the moment when it all breaks through, but don't count on it. That's all I will say.
All right.
Yeah.
I hope that answered Tarif's question.
Yeah.
Tarif, are you with us?
Oh yes, yeah. I'm sorry. I put myself on mute. I forgot to unmute. But anyway, I'm glad you said that, because people, the human being, have a tendency to go on fantasy.
Yeah.
And that's how so many people was duped by this Q phenomenon, and now it's being duped with this other phenomenon coming up, talking about the UFO files, which is BS, right? So you want to stay in reality, and that's what I practice every day to do my best to stay in reality. But it's almost like a calming effect, right? Like an opiate, which I'm not saying I take any drugs, but what I'm saying is, like, people, wishful thinking. And with that wishful thinking, it gets you in trouble. It gets you to follow Q. It gets you to follow these people saying, "Oh, this is gonna happen on this such and such date," and when that date come around, nothing's happened. Okay, but one thing about this case, Mr. Alexander Kurz, one of the thing about this case, like you say, this could be the beginning, because Maricopa County don't really have to flip at all. If they find anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 ballots that was tampered with, that's going to put in doubt. Then that's going to give the lawyers in Michigan, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and also I heard New Mexico and Minnesota, got cases there too. They're going to give them, hey, we got legal grounds now where, hey, circuit court judges or judges in this district, we need, look at these Dominion voting machines and these ballot count machines. We need to look at these signatures too, because if they found anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 votes in Maricopa County and showing proof that something happened, then maybe the same thing up here too. And from that, you have a legal case now. And that's why you had 73 lawyers. Yeah, that's why you had 73 lawyers who went down to Arizona 2 weeks ago.
I mean, it is an important case, and we will see what the outcome is. If it does go in the direction you say, then that will be very important indeed. In fact, enormously important. But bear in mind, every decision in a court case can be subject to appeal also. And, you may have a judge who takes one view at first instance, but, will it survive on appeal? We shall see. I have been very disappointed up to now by the outcomes of legal cases. I say disappointed from a procedural point of view. I've seen procedural things done which I don't understand and completely disagree with, irrespective of the eventual outcome itself. And I'm afraid I've now reached that point when I won't believe anything until it happens in a court case, particularly on this subject. By the way, can I also say, Tarif, I'm glad you brought up the topic of Julian Assange, because if you don't mind, I'll just provide a quick update on that. Because as you may know, the US government appealed against the refusal to extradite him on health grounds. Now, the High Court appears to be extremely reluctant even to hear that appeal. So for the moment, it's not even certain that the High Court in London will accept that appeal has any right to be heard at all. In which case, it's possible, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible that the decision will stand that there will be no appeal hearing, and that Julian Assange will be released very soon. That's the latest indication from the lawyers. One reason may be, by the way, that it's now confirmed that Assange's legal team have put in a cross appeal in which they're making all sorts of criticisms of the judge for saying that the US would have been entitled to extradite Assange, but for all sorts, but for his health problems. And it could be that the High Court is reluctant to go into all that too. So it's looking as if things are moving in Assange's favor from a legal point of view. It's not confirmed, it's not certain, but those are the latest indications I'm getting from the legal team.
Wow, that it gives some hope at the same time.
Yeah.
I hope they don't see it so they can release this man and he can get medical attention and he can be with his wife and children. Because he is a reporter, and I'm seeing an uptick of people from around the world tweeting out his name. Julian Assange, Freedom of the Press. Noam Chomsky every other day tweeting out a quote from Julian Assange. You got a video of the Azerbaijan president, the people that fought against Armenia, that country. I forgot this. He was from last year when he responded to that report from the BBC. Now it's making its rounds again, and it's up to like 2.7, 2.8 million views on the internet. That is good publicity for Julian Assange and his legal team. And hopefully that he can be released one day. And gentlemen, y'all got one of the best shows out there. I'm gonna throw some names out there for y'all if y'all want to write them on, like Harley Schleicher from the Lewisha movement. You got Matthew Atwood, and you got V. Gorilla, economist. He's a conservative that's living reality. You know what I'm saying? And of course George Galloway. I like him. He's the man. You know, he got Fault Lines Radio and also the Backstory. But thank you for taking my call, and I want to hold up too much of your time. So God bless y'all. Okay. And happy belated Orthodox Christian Easter to y'all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tarif. Take care.
Anytime.
All right. I think we have Alan back in the house. Let's bring him in. Alan, are you with us now? Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, terrific. My fault. Great to see you. Alexander, I agree with much of what you say about London, and I too live in North London. But what I'd like to say, of the millions of things I'd like to talk about what's happening today, I'll take your mind back to the 2012 mayor election when Boris Johnson beat Ken Livingstone. How did that happen? It happened because the Labour councils did not want Livingstone to become the mayor. Because one of the main reasons, and you see it now, Boris Johnson immediately created all these property development areas for creating huge new property developments. The councils control who is the mayor. I believe, and it's in my experience, the councils are into property development, the Labour councils. In the last 20 years, we've had very little affordable or social housing built in London. We've had huge developments in Labour areas for, in many cases, anonymous international finance. House prices have risen incredibly. Having no social housing maintains high house prices. The result is London has become a home for the very wealthy or the very poor, many of whom are immigrants and on welfare. There is now a huge bill for housing subsidy, housing welfare in London. And I think Khan is just their puppet. He does nothing. let's face it, he's done nothing,
No.
especially over housing. He's a complete
No.
little jumped up corporal, if you like. That's what I was going to say. There's much more I can say, but that's the first thing. How are we going to change this in London? London is being denuded of ordinary British working people because they cannot afford to live here unless they're on subsidies. And this is going to continue if Khan stays. I've got other things, but I'll let you answer that. Yeah.
No, I'm entirely agree, and I think your analysis is spot on. London is the British San Francisco. If you want to know where London is going, it's not there, but it is heading steadily in that direction. You have an immensely rich group of people who have enormous opportunities in London. I mean, London can provide you with anything. If you're rich in London, the whole world is there for you. But it's incredibly difficult, increasingly difficult for people outside that circle to live what you might call a middle-class life. It's becoming very, very difficult to do so. And you're quite right. The situation with housing in London is appalling and getting worse all the time. I think your characterization of Sadiq Khan is perfect. I think I agree with it 100%. I mean, he's certainly not someone I would ever support. And it's been fascinating for me to see London, which is the city where I lived all my life, all my adult life, and my childhood too, and to see how it's changing and changing fast and evolving, as I said, steadily in the direction that San Francisco in the United States has already reached. And the politics are very similar too.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to say is Brexit. We haven't talked about this, or you haven't talked about this so far regarding the elections today. I think this is the elephant in the room.
Right.
What happened with me is that I suddenly saw that the Labour Party and the BBC and others disliked British democracy. They just said, no, we don't like that. We don't like your vote. We're going to try and change it. And we're so arrogant, we don't care what you think, especially you Londoners, And that, I think, is the crux of the matter with the swing over the country in the local elections. That, and the allied to Brexit, is immigration. Again, none of the media are talking about either Brexit, the effect, or the immigration effect in these elections. Why? What's wrong with journalism and the media in this country? I've got a lot more to say, Alexander. Great stuff. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Alan. But I mean, again, I think you're absolutely right. And Brexit is the elephant in the room. Going back to what we said at the start of this program, I mean, given that the problem Labour has is that it was perceived across the country as the party that was going to try and extinguish the results of the Brexit referendum, which you're perfectly correct, was an assault on democracy to do that. I mean, you can argue, you can spin it any way you like, but that's what it was. Picking an arch Remainer as its leader, and the person who more than anyone else is identified across the country as the person who engaged in all those parliamentary tactics to achieve that result. Well, that was electorally suicidal. And given the attachment British people have to their democracy, which they do, it makes no sense to me. I mean, as I said, it's a party which, if it takes this course, it deserves to fail.
Yes, and the other thing is, I must say, and my perception of the London Labour Party is that they are bigger snobs than the Tories ever could be. And their dislike of the Cockney, the London working man, if you like, is intense. They prefer it's unbelievable. And these people want to run the country. The other thing, let's look at the all women shortlists that have have made the MPs in London, the Labour MPs, the female MPs, via all women shortlists, has kept out working class men from any say in Parliament, and they're an absolute disaster. They're incredibly stupid politically. You think the Labour Party's politically naive? They are just naive. And these people are in Parliament. I'm shocked. I'll leave it there before I say anything that gets us into trouble.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan. Take care. All right, we're going to bring in, we have Irish Partisan, Dave, Christian, Simon, Arjun Bomio, and Alex. I think I got everybody there. So we're going to bring in Irish Partisan, followed by Dave and Christian, and then we'll work down the list. Irish Partisan, how are you?
Guys, good evening from Minsk. Can you hear me?
Clearly,
Yes.
very well.
How is everything in Minsk?
Everything is fine here. Can't complain. Still living it here. So yeah, things are a bit quiet here. So
all right, make sure you guys check out our Irish Partisan's YouTube channel, which is really cool, and I follow it, and I follow your posts as well.
okay, well, I'm here actually to comment on the UK elections. You know, because from being from Ireland and the UK being our closest neighbours, and also having a lot of relatives in the UK, you know, it kind of touches me, and it also affects me as well, given the scope of Brexit and the effect that it's happening on Ireland. You know, we have Northern Ireland. You know, the unionist population decided to remain within the UK, and now we have the whole dispute with the border. You know, where does the Brexit border run? Does it run? Is it a land border, or is it going to be a sea border between the island of Ireland and the mainland UK? But anyway, so I've been following the results of the UK elections, and I have to say, I'm absolutely gutted to hear you know, the Tories sweeping up in working class areas. Now, as an Irish person, as an Irish Republican, I have a lot of beef with the Tories. You know, I absolutely despise the Conservatives, given, you know, what they've done over the last century or so, even longer. You know, but you know, when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party back in 2016, I had a lot of hope for Labour, and I had a lot of hope for Jeremy Corbyn, in that Labour was going to reconnect with its working class base, its working class voters, and also that Labour was going to go back to its socialist class politics roots. You know, because given the fact that we had Margaret Thatcher for you know, 11 years, and then we had successive Conservative and neoliberal Labour governments, a change was needed in the UK. A change of direction was needed, and I thought that Jeremy Corbyn would give that much needed direction, you know, for the UK, you know, and being, you know, he was a socialist, you know, engaging in class politics rather than this identity politics, 26,000 different genders and pronouns, and, you know, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell is a cisgender or a person is. You know, I don't know what it is, but anyway, it's just been a disaster. Jeremy Corbyn was undermined by his own party, by the political class, the political establishment in the UK, because they saw him as a threat to them, and a threat to the very the fabric, the rotten neoliberal fabric that had been building up in Britain for over 30 years, ever since Margaret Thatcher began her assault against the miners, against the unions, way back in the mid 1980s. So what has happened is that Jeremy Corbyn was ousted from the Labour Party. We got Keir Starmer, and we've had a disaster in terms of politics. The working class has completely abandoned Labour. They've either stayed at home, or they've flocked to the Conservatives, which is even a bigger tragedy. Because, you know, when you look at what the Conservatives have done in a lot of working class areas in England, they've just hollowed them out. They've destroyed them. They have opened up the borders. Well, Labour did that as well, and you know, it's just a capital inflight, and it's priced a lot of the native working class people out of that, not only the housing market, but also of the employment market as well. So out of all of this, what has happened, and I want to touch on a point that Alex McCurris made, was that the Labour Party, in essence, has become the party of the professional and managerial classes, the student radicals, the social activists, and the uber liberals living in the fashionable cities like in London, in parts of Manchester and so on. And the umbilical cord, I think after today and what Alex McCure has said, I think that the umbilical cord that it had to the working class has been severed. And I think it may well prove terminal, to be honest with you.
I completely agree. I think you are absolutely spot on. If you want to understand, if you want to blame someone for the fact that the Conservatives are sweeping these working class areas, blame the Labour Party. I mean, can I just say, it's one of the interesting things about the Hartlepool by-election, which we've been discussing so much, is that there was no significant increase in the Conservative vote there. The Conservative vote is about the same. It's a bit higher than what they got in 2019, which is, by the way, an achievement. In by-elections, the votes of all parties tend to fall. But there's been no huge surge of support for the Conservatives in Hartlepool. What has happened is that the Labour vote there has collapsed. It went down from 21,000 in 2019 to just over 8,000 now. It's an implosion. And that is the reason why Labour lost. And it is a fact, and it's happening. It's reproducing itself right across the country, which is that people, working people, say to themselves, well, what sort of Labour Party is this anymore? The Labour Party was once upon a time our party. We created it. We created it to represent us, but it's no longer doing that anymore. That's not a Labour Party in any sense anymore. So why should we go on supporting it? Because it is not interested in us. It's not interested in our views. It isn't concerned with the life we live. It is far more concerned with all the various issues which you were talking about, which are totally remote from the lives of working class people in all the communities where the Labour Party originated and where they formerly used to support it. Now,
because as you said, the Labour Party, it came from its working class roots. It came from the trade union movement. That's where it came from. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember the miners' strikes in 1984 and 1985. And when there was a lot of support in Ireland for Arthur Scargill and the miners' strikes, but it was also in tandem with what was happening in Northern Ireland, and we felt a lot of affinity towards the miners and towards the trade unions. And 30 years ago, Britain had a very strong trade union movement that was associated with with the Labour Party. But now it's been completely hollowed out, and we're coming towards a German-type Merkel situation where politics has been completely hollowed out.
Absolutely. I mean, you were talking about the unions. I mean, I can remember, I'm sure you can remember, that there was a time when you used to hear people talk about the Labour movement, and it had its industrial wing, which was the unions, and it had its political wing, which was the Labour Party. But it was part of a movement of things. Well, it is decades since I heard any Labour politician speaking in that way. And of course, just not just a question of unions, it's a question of communities, of working class associations, all of those sort of things. The Labour Party is not interested in any of that anymore. It is interested in the kind of views that you talked about. And that's why it's losing. And that's why it's going to continue to lose, because there may be support for that in places like California and perhaps even North London, but you won't find much support for it anywhere else, at least not in the UK.
Absolutely. Guys, thanks a million. That's all I want to say. It's a great show, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irish Partisan. Take care. All right, let's bring in Dave Williams coming into the stream here. Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good after having to run out in the backyard and chase off the electrician. Hey, great question. I've been reading through your app, and I've been reading a lot of stuff about that the Baltic Word has posted, and they're talking about the upcoming NATO maneuvers and everything, and the decimation that it leaves behind in their area. It sure smells to me like the same rapists, murderers, malcontents that seem to follow NATO all over Africa.
Mm.
What do you think, Alexander?
What in the Baltic states? You mean? Sorry, I mean I didn't.
Yes, the Baltic states, NATO exercises. You did a show on Defender.
I have. I have just done
which was posted.
Which was
actually
just posted
about an hour before this live stream. Yeah.
Live stream, exactly. So
just my luck. Steal your thunder.
Check it out. Check it out after the live stream, Dave. He did a show on your exact question, pretty much.
But if you're talking about the sort of collection of carpetbaggers and people of that kind who tend to follow in the shadows of the NATO armies, well, you're absolutely right. You will find them not just in the Baltic states. You will find them right across Eastern Europe, and not just NATO, of course, but all the combine that goes with that. NATO, the various entities that nowadays make up what calls itself the European Union and all the rest, they are the same people, and you will find that too. I mean, one of the most fascinating developments recently, for example, is I'm sure you've heard about this incident that has happened in the Czech Republic and in Bulgaria about the fact that there was an explosion at an ammunition depot, and the Czechs are saying that this is the work of Russian agents and things of this kind. What is interesting about that story, and people are starting to ask that question finally in the Czech Republic, is why do you have ammunition depots of that nature in private ownership, owned by Bulgarian arms dealers, and apparently without any kind of external supervision and control? Why is that happening? How is that possible? And the reason it's possible is because those Bulgarian arms dealers, and not just Bulgarian arms dealers of every stripe and kind, are now all over Eastern Europe, especially the Balkans, by the way, because of course they are extremely necessary in order to make it possible for NATO to fulfill its ambitions in various places. I did a whole article some years ago about the central role these people were playing, for example, in providing military equipment to the Kurds, who the United States was supporting in Syria, and not just the Kurds, but also sort of jihadi groups that are fighting in Syria also. It's a whole network of people that have been created, and they've been created and are being protected because all of this sort of culture, if you like, always follows one step behind the expansion of NATO's armies. There it is. But do see my program on Defender 2021, European Defender 2021. You will find it there on my channel. You'll also see that I've got a reference to an article by Scott Ritter, who is a former Marine Corps intelligence officer and a member of veteran intelligence professionals for sanity. And he's discussed European Defender 21 also, and you'll see that both he and I have come to the view that what it shows is that in military terms, NATO is not in good shape. It exposes its weaknesses also, and does so in a way that calls into question whether it's even, properly speaking, any longer a military alliance.
Well, it kind of seems to me like what's going on there is pretty much the same as what was going on during the Vietnam War, where it's one hell of a way to win people's hearts and minds when you're blowing the shit out of them, raping their women, and it just seems to me like that's the ideal way to push people on over to the other side.
Well, exactly. You're absolutely right. That is perfectly true.
Well, thanks a lot. I've got my magic cap on, and over the 2 weeks since I got it, I'm probably smarter than the average Democrat, at least now.
Great way to end that one. Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
much.
gentlemen.
Take care. All right, we're gonna bring in. I'll bring in Bomeo because he's running short on time, and then Christian, you're up next. Let me bring in Bomeo,
Yeah.
and then we'll bring in Christian, and we'll keep things rolling. Bomeo, how you doing?
Yes, I'm doing well. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Birmingham.
Good afternoon. Anyway, favorite program. I look forward to it every Friday, and I also listen to every programs you guys put out. So I have an idea that I want to post, and then probably that you see if you can, educate us a little bit on this. Yeah. Look, United States of America is a great country. Yeah. I do believe that it should take up its responsibility and sit at a table with the other great powers, the US, the China, and the other countries that represent a large populations in the world. Rather than it's allying this with small countries like the Baltic states. Anyway, I haven't listened to your program. It was just by coincidence that the same question is relating to that. Rather than it's allying with smaller countries like the Baltic states, Taiwan, and a few other countries. Yeah, I think that is not doing a good service to mankind. I think the US should take its responsibility and sit at the table and sort out the whole issues that face mankind so that we will all benefit out of whatever result will come out of that. What do you think about my opinion?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is exactly what the United States should do. And by the way, just to say, Alex and I have done some programs recently discussing US foreign policy in places like the Pacific. And I've done a recent program in which I've discussed, again, US policies in response to, and this program was provoked by a rather interesting commentary that the Chinese government has issued through its, semi-official newspaper Global Times. And of course, we've heard talk about the United States wanting to de-escalate the situation with Russia and wanting a summit meeting with Putin in June. By the way, the latest indications are that the Russians are now cooling to that idea and that they're saying to themselves that there's really no point because the United States is not prepared to deal with us. But Birmingham, you're absolutely right. That is what the United States would do. Absolutely, the United States should have its red lines. It should have its red lines on trade. It should have its red lines on economic transfers and technology transfers and copyrights and things of that kind. It should also have its geopolitical red lines too. But it's got to recognize that other countries have them also. It can't go on pushing against other countries all the time, especially great powers like China and Russia, and not expect that that will provoke a reaction. And given that it doesn't have the power anymore to dictate to these great powers in the way that it briefly did in the 1990s, it has no rational alternative other than to sit down and talk to them. But that is something that I'm afraid the neocon faction in Washington finds extraordinarily difficult to accept. In fact, not just difficult, I don't think they ever will, because it is so far beyond their own political imagination. And it goes so much against the whole raison d'etre that they will never do it.
Which if it will do that, there is an additional benefit for the US population as well as everybody else on the globe.
Absolutely. One of the most interesting things about this Chinese editorial, which I mean, you mustn't take this entirely seriously, but it seemed to accept that for the time being, if the United States did that, it would remain the greatest, most powerful country, because even if China overtakes it in its aggregate economic power, the United States will still be much more advanced technologically. It will still be individually, Americans will be very much richer. It will still be at the center of its alliance system. So it has strategic space to make these kind of decisions. But at the moment, it's finding it very difficult to do that. And again, that very same Chinese editorial made the point that there is complete discordance and uncertainty about what the government in Washington really wants and what it wants to do, because they've sensed, and this is again something we've discussed many times on the Duran, Alex and I, that there is no actually strong, purposeful government in Washington able to make decisions, able to make practical and realistic decisions in the interests of the United States, in the interests of the American people, in the interests, by the way, of the West as a whole. It's not got that kind of government. And in that drift that arises from it, well, all sorts of bad things happen. And I'm afraid that's the reality. So, yes, I agree. That is what the United States should do. It's got the means to go up against the Chinese and the Russians and negotiate toughly and successfully and strike a good bargain with them. But will it? Is it able to do that? Many people in the United States think as you do. Unfortunately, if you look at Washington and the political class there and the government, very few people there seem to do, and those that do are isolated.
Yeah. My last question, Mr. Alexander, do you see anybody on the horizon that will drag the US out of its whatever situation it is now? Do you see any politician, anybody in the horizon, maybe not immediately, but down the road, that will pull US out of where it is?
Well, I mean, there's always Donald Trump, I suppose. I mean, bear in mind that, I mean, he did try to do some of the things you've discussed. I mean, maybe he didn't do it very coherently. You can criticize his application, but he did show some understanding of these things. And he is saying, you know, hinting that he's going to be back in 2024. Other than him, I'll be straightforward about it. I don't see anyone. That's the real problem. I don't see anybody coming out of the political class in Washington who has that kind of realism and that practical, tough-minded capacity to see the world as it really is. And that's the truth. And I'm very much afraid that if anybody like that were to emerge and were to win the White House, which would be very difficult, that person would find themselves facing all the same problems that Donald Trump did, and perhaps finding it even more difficult than Trump did to withstand those sort of pressures, because that is the reality of where the problems in the United States are.
That's true. Trump was an opportunity, but I think they hated him from head to toe.
Absolutely, they did.
Why?
But partly because, as I said, in his own idiosyncratic way, I think he was edging towards the views that you have. I mean, he is a sort of complicated figure in himself. He would say something sometimes, other things other times. But remember, he was able to sit down with Kim Jong-un. No other American leader has done that. No other American leader seems to be interested in doing it. He was able to do that. He wanted to talk to Putin. He actually personally got on well with Xi Jinping. He was prepared to do those things. And of course, that was the reason, first and foremost, why they hated him. That's why someone like Liz Cheney opposed him. And by the way, it's interesting to see that she's probably on her way out. Well, we shall know, it seems, fairly soon.
Nice weekend, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Romeo. Take care. All right. Let's see. Let's bring in Christian. We have Christian. We have Arjun, Simon, Zahir, and Alex. All right. You know, in Greek, Alexander, what they did to Trump, you know, in Greek it's translated, we say, they ate him. They just ate him alive because they just hated him so much.
Absolutely.
I'm sure Sparta the Warrior Queen will also know what I'm getting at when I talk about what they did to Trump. But yeah, you're right. Let's bring in Christian. Christian, you're with us. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for what you said about Trump. But maybe he's not making it too easy for himself. This new social media platform, it seems like nothing.
I agree.
I mean,
You mean the Trump desk? That he
Trump
put out?
desk, yeah. I mean,
it's a blog. It's a mini blog.
It's a blog. I mean, yeah.
You should
It's
go
not
to
a plan.
Gab or something like that. So, okay, if you say that Trump is coming back, it's only hope, then he needs to finally figure out social media.
Yeah.
He should hire Alex for that.
Yeah.
I mean, then he would be on track. I mean, you said it all the time in your videos to create a web app, not to go to the web to the app store and everything. I will have some questions for you about monetizing videos and everything. But Alexander, I'd like to ask you about the British politics, and is there any really opposition to the warmongering? They're even sending warships into the Black Sea. I mean, they seem even more crazy than Americans.
You are absolutely right. There is no actually, it's a very good point. Actually, generally speaking, there is no opposition. That's one of the things about Keir Starmer. He barely opposes the government on anything. But if you're talking about Starmer and the Labour Party, it has been completely captured by its neocon tendency, which is extremely strong, by the way. I was getting some literature from the Labour Party a few weeks ago, in which, to my astonishment, they were reviving all the stories about, Britain needing to engage in humanitarian interventionism and R2P, requirement to protect and all those things. All those old Blairite themes were coming back from within the Labour Party. So you have neocons running the Labour Party, neocons running the Conservative Party. The entire media here, the mainstream media, is the establishment media, is entirely media dominated, neocon dominated. So you see no real opposition to this at all. If you talk beyond the political class, if you talk to people, people who in their, their offices, their workplaces, something, by the way, which I do. I'm somebody who makes a point of talking to lots of different people. You will find opposition to that at every level and everywhere. I mean, that is widespread in Britain. There is a very, very strong feeling in Britain, as there is in the United States, that Britain should not be involved in these kind of things, that these are terrible things, the terrible things are done, that they have awful consequences for the countries that they're done to, that they have awful consequences for Britain itself. And that is far from being an uncommon view. And by the way, you will find working class people who hold it. You will find people who drive taxis, for example, who hold it, and who will, over the course of a conversation will come and talk to you about it. But amongst the political and media class, you will find no one who talks like that at all. And it is another sign of the enormous detachment that there is between real politics and the politics of the British elite. And it also goes very far to explain many of the problems within the British Labour Party, bearing in mind that its traditional working class base has always historically been constituted that part of the British community, British society, that was always most strongly anti-interventionist.
Thank you. Any updates on the Skripals? Where might they be?
Oh, well,
I mean, are they dead? Are they alive? I don't know.
Well, you must tell me, Christian, because I have absolutely no idea.
I really think the last we heard was New Zealand. Is that correct?
Well,
that's been the last.
Absolutely, quite. Yeah. I mean, they vanished off the face of the earth. There's a court case underway in which I understand that the family of the young woman who died very tragically when her partner found that bottle with the substance. I can't mention its name, unfortunately. That's the trouble. But she's bringing a claim apparently against the Russian government, and there's a witness about there's a coroner's inquest about this, and the judge is apparently sympathetic. But of actual facts, we've seen virtually nothing. I mean, it's an extraordinarily it's a subject that people don't want to talk about, at least not elite people want to talk about. I'll give you an idea, by the way, of how surreal thinking on this issue is in Britain. You will find some supporters of Starmer who say that the reason that Corbyn lost the election was not because he supported the second referendum proposal, but because he raised questions in Parliament about the Skripal affair. I can tell you for a fact. I can tell you for a fact, because I said I talked to many people around the country. That is absolutely not the case. That is totally wrong. But that's the kind of mindset amongst the British elite that you're up against. Alex, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say, I bet they're tucked away on some UK or US military base. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I'm sure that's right. Yes.
I think they're hidden away somewhere on a base.
Yes.
I don't know.
Maybe we'll see them again, maybe not. But I'm very happy that I have been through all of the Duran videos on YouTube now.
Oh my!
Or my computer has. I've been letting them run in the background, and I've been making sure to click on the ads when I've seen them. But they've been just running in the background, and I'm done now. I'm through.
Well, Christian, if I may say, that's a labor of Hercules, because there must be over 1,000 of them by now, at least. I mean, I'm not sure, but I mean, we've been very busy. All of us at the Duran have been very busy over these last couple of years.
1,521.
Wow.
So, so it was good to see you in your early days. You walking on the streets of Moscow with Peter Lavelle, and he's having his funny intros about the Mug Club and everything. So it was good. But I'm wondering. For monetization, I have my small YouTube channel, almost 1,000 subscribers, but I'm thinking about this would be for my Serbian audience when I'm on Serbian TV and everything. But I'm wondering about monetization of these videos. I see that Mark Dice and some guys that have monetized Rumble videos. I haven't seen that the Duran has monetized their videos yet. So what is the best way if I'm going to make a new channel like Revolver interviews in English, Rumble or BitChute or Locals, or how should I proceed here, Alex?
Well, let's do this. Just hit me up after the live stream, and I'll give you some. You can fill me in a little bit more as to what you're looking to do, and I'll give you my thoughts. I will say this about YouTube: it's a big platform. It's a massive platform, but with each passing day, the words we're allowed to say are less and less and less. And it's getting very hard to communicate at this point in time. But just hit me up after the live stream, and we could talk a little more in depth about what you're planning to do, and if I can help, I'll try my best to help.
Yeah.
Excellent. But YouTube is still also very important for the Duran business model as of now.
Look, as many platforms as we can be on is great, as much as we can handle. We have 24 hours in a day as well. But like I said, with each passing day, it just gets harder and harder to speak. I mean, Alexander just in this conversation, he couldn't mention the poison that was used on the Skripals, because we know that when we say these words, not only do you get demonetized, but your video actually gets flagged, can get a strike, and sometimes it just gets taken down just right away. So we always have to be careful.
I'm very much aware of these limits. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, Locals, Super U, Odyssey. There's some great platforms that are coming out. Yeah. And I would definitely check those out. But let's speak after the live stream, and we can discuss it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring in. We have Arjun and Simon, and Zahir, Alex, and Zarael. So let's bring in Arjun. Arjun, are you with us?
Hi, good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you? Am I pronouncing that correct? Arjun?
Arjun? Yeah, Arjun. It's Arjun, actually.
Arjun, okay.
Yeah, big fan of you guys. I've been following you for like about a year and a half, 2 years. Like, I really enjoy the stuff, and you guys are like the go-to people for my information on the Western Hemisphere or whatever is happening in the world. So, because I hardly trust Western mainstream media, right? So, yeah, I got a couple of questions here for Alexander and a question for Alex, which I'll come to in the end. I'm studying at Kiel University in the UK, right? So, and I lean Tory. So my question was like, when I came here, I was quite surprised with all the election hullabaloo that was going around, like post Brexit. Like there was a period of instability and all. Like when in last year's general election, not last year, 2019 general election, when the Labour Party was campaigning out here in Crewe, where I live, those guys they sort of looked at us, like POCs as sort of a vote bank. Like I remember a Labour worker coming to my house, and sort of he rang the doorbell, and I opened the door. The moment he looked at me, I could see the gears turning in his head. Like I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking like, this guy votes for us. So which for me was quite like offensive, right? It's an offensive thought. Right? Like how can you just look at me, look at this color of my skin, and say, oh yeah, this guy votes for us? So I mean, in that election taught me a lot about the Labour Party. It means I earlier used to think that Indians used to vote for Labour because Labour supports Indians and they're interested in minority rights. But since the coming of this progressive woke movement, I don't think, I mean, the left has the interests of minorities in the UK, or for that matter, anywhere else in the West. So, yeah. But once Boris came in, like, there was a period of like stability. There was a period, but now it seems like there are people in the establishment who are just waiting to chew him out, right? Waiting for him to make a mistake. I mean, could you explain that in more detail? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. Can I just say, first of all, on the Labour Party and on its taking votes for granted and its extraordinarily patronising approach to many of the blocks of voters, you are absolutely right. And it is also its problem. It took Scotland for granted. It took its working class voters for granted. It's taking Indian voters for granted. By the way, what you say about Indian voters, I'm hearing that lots of Indian voters are now deserting the Labour Party because they feel about it exactly as you do. And look at the Conservatives. Rishi Sunak, whatever you may think of him, he's Indian. They are reaching out. They have people like Priti Patel, who's also Indian. They've got people like Kwasi Kwarteng, who's West African. So they are not any longer the kind of party that the Labour Party could once easily categorize, the Conservatives, that's to say, as a sort of English white party. It's a myth. And again, the Labour Party is not thinking this out, and it is behaving in a manipulative and machine-like way towards its voters, and it will lose them. It will lose all of them. That is exactly what it is doing. Now, and I'm not surprised at all, by the way, that you had that experience, because I know many people do. But can I also say about the Conservatives, the thing you must understand about the Conservatives is that the Conservative Party is an extraordinarily ruthless party. It's one of the reasons why it is in power so much, because the Conservatives are very much drawn. They know how to win elections. They know how to gain power. They know how to exercise it. But one of the consequences is that conservative politics at the top can be highly ruthless. So you see moves by conservative political figures against Boris Johnson because they sensed that he was weak or had been weakened because of certain allegations that were being made against him. And you saw how those were fanned up. And that's the reality of conservative politics at the highest level. It's a bit of a shark pool. And if you sort of, have a little drop of blood on the water, the sharks will come and they'll feed. And you get a feeding frenzy. And it can be very, very ruthless and rather frightening to watch, but also very impressive. Because, as I said, it's a party that understands power and which is focused on it. So don't be dismayed or surprised. I remember how the Conservative Party turned on Margaret Thatcher, who had won them 3 elections, transformed Britain, seemed to be the dominant figure in British politics, and yet it looked as if she might lose power, lose the election for them, and they turned on her, and they did so in the most extraordinary and ruthless way. So that is how the Conservatives are. You must accept them as what they are. That is the reality of politics in Britain.
That's quite interesting, and the point that you made about Labour, that's also quite interesting. But one thing I would like to say is that Labour is in this. I'm addressing not only you guys, I'm also addressing your viewers. I am a Bengali, right? I'm from West Bengal in India, and that was ruled by the Communist Party for 34 years, right? Straight. It was a very bloody regime, and they used to burn villages. They used to outright kill people, in broad daylight. So, and that was succeeded by another violent regime. But the fact is, all these left-oriented regimes in India, the so-called socialists and the communists and the so-called pseudo-seculars, one thing that they have always relied on is sort of smuggling in illegals from Bangladesh. So, and they have really tried to change the demographic so much so that it has become a serious problem. There is a huge jihadi problem in West Bengal. So I mean, it's very for Hindus in the UK, when we saw them we saw the Labour Party gravitate towards more of these Islamist kind of people. We were extremely concerned. And that is why, at least Hindus that I speak to on the street, most of them voted for Tory in the last election. So, I mean, as long as Labour sort of fraternizes with these kind of, let's just say, questionable people, I mean, there is no, at least Hindus will keep moving away from Labour. So,
absolutely.
Yeah,
I entirely agree with you. I mean, I can see that I've heard this said by many people, that the Indian community, which 30 years ago was very strongly pro-Labour, is that no longer. It is drifting away. It's drifting away, as many other communities in Britain are, as its working class base are, as the Scottish voters have done. And unless the Labour Party completely reconstitutes itself, which I've no belief it ever will, it's going to find eventually that every single part of its coalition has gone, except perhaps those people in North London who have the various, opinions about identities and things of that kind, which, as I said, belong more to San Francisco than they do to Britain. But you're absolutely right. That's the drift of events. That's the way things are going. By the way, Arjun, can I just say, the book I was reading, I don't know whether you can see it, but this is my reading last night. And your one.
Can you read the title, Alexander? Because I don't know if it shows too well.
It's the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjun is the great warrior who has the dialogue with Krishna. So, I'm I'm somebody who's always taken a great interest in Indian things.
I appreciate that, and thanks for that. One last thing, I'd like to address this to Alex, if I can. Alex, Indians have felt a little hurt with Biden's behavior regarding blocking of raw materials to for coronavirus vaccine. So, like, I wanted to ask you a question. Like, the Biden regime has been goofing up a lot, right? With the censorship, with the sort of abandoning allies. I mean, they are sort of damaging America's reputation around the world. I mean, I won't blame Americans in this. Like, Americans Americans have no control over the leaders except for in elections. So, like, but the fact is that these guys who have at least Biden seems to be compromised in a lot of ways to the outside observer. Like how are Americans dealing with this rise in violence, this censorship, like lack of leadership? I mean, people around the world, like, there was a poll done recently where, like, most people saw America as a threat to democracy rather than China. I mean, how are Americans viewing this?
I think it's half and half. It depends who you ask. Depends which half of America you ask. You know,
I mean, is it that tribal?
Look, I think there's people who are in the U.S. right now on the live stream that could probably answer this a lot better than I could. But from what I'm reading, and Alexander, I'm sure you'll probably also agree. You know, while there is a very large and significant portion of the U.S. population that is also, you know, thinking like you are, June, and scratching their heads, what the hell is going on, and how are we going to deal with this? And we're losing our country. And I get the feeling that America is being lost. I mean, every day we're witnessing it. There is another part of the population which, you know, is significant, which, you know, we have to admit it. They support Biden. They like Biden. They support Harris. They like Harris. They're into this woke ideology. They're into critical race theory and equity and all that stuff. And you know, that's why I say it depends who you ask this question. And I don't understand how people can look at Biden and say this is the president. But you know, I've got people who are very close to me who are supporting Biden. They say, no, he's our guy. And I scratch my head like you. But you know, there's no doubt that Biden is not making the decisions. I think that's crystal clear.
The one thing I would add to all of that, though, is this, which is that, of course, we've had opinion polls because we had the 100 days, which is a time when people look at these things. And bear in mind, opinion polls in the United States have been consistently skewed in his favor. And of course, the media commentary is also skewed very heavily, overwhelmingly in his favor. And yet his ratings turned out to be not very good. So it seems to me that the country is very split about him. A lot of people in the US look at this president and they don't actually have much time for him. So there are the people that Alex was talking about who passionately support him and who support everything he stands for or think they do. And there are a lot of people in the US, an awful lot of people who are very skeptical also.
You know what they support, Alexander Arjun? These people, they don't really support, this is my impression. It's not that they support Biden, they support the collective. And I think it goes back to that socialist type of mentality where these are people that support the ideology and the collective. And at this moment in time, that person that's the face of the collective for now is Biden. Of course, we know it's going to be Harris very, very soon. But, you know, they just support this collective group. So whether it's Biden, Harris, Obama, Susan Rice, it doesn't matter. They're going to always circle the wagon and they're always going to support that ideology. You know, I think the Trump camp is a lot more, or at least the Trump movement, let's call it that, is a lot more free thinking. You know, you have conservatives, you have libertarians. You know, we have a lot of things in common with progressives as far as you know, getting out of the foreign entanglements and all the wars as well. So, as well as free speech and things like that. So it's, you know, it is what it is, man. And we're going to have to hopefully get through this with Biden and Harris, but don't be surprised if they find a way to squeeze Harris in there for another 4 years.
No.
If that's the case, then we're in real big trouble.
Yeah, you say that. That's quite an interesting point about like how the left has really taken over a lot of sort of cultural megaphones of society.
They own everything.
No, yeah, I hear other Indian people talk about this, like people who live in the US, and I'm seeing this in the UK as well. Like in the early part of the 20th century, the conservatives were thought to be like the Christian conservatives, the orthodoxy, like they were like our way or the highway, right? Like now it seems like the conservatives have become the heterodoxy and sort of the left has become the orthodoxy. Like you will sort of abide by our speech laws. You cannot do this, you cannot do that. You have to accept this, like whatever 150 genders. Like, I mean, okay, but if the one thing that made the West proud of itself was its, say, democracy and its institutions. Now the left has sort of, at least to our eyes, it seems that the left has succeeded in subverting some of the best things about your countries, right? Like the things that you used to feel proud about. Like, and I feel I sort of resonate with that because the left has tried to do the same thing in India. So yeah, like Hindus abroad are probably the most sympathetic to the conservative plight right now than anybody else probably. Like, and yeah, I just wanted to say that. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Arjun.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Arjun.
Take care.
Can I just say we're starting to get some results from Scotland, and they seem to suggest a swing to the Conservatives from the Nationalists there. They're not very good, but places like Banffshire and Buchan Coast, the swing was 10.3% from SNP, Scottish Nationalists, to Conservatives. In Aberdeen, Donshire, 6.2% from SNP to Conservatives. Clydebank and Millinggrave, it was actually the Labour Party that did better. So anyway, it looks as if the Nationalists have lost ground in Scotland.
The Nationalists have lost ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still very early votes, but that seems to be the trend at the moment. And it looks as if Nicola Sturgeon, who is the leader of the SNP, has accepted that they're not going to win a majority in the Scottish Parliament. So we'll see what the results are.
All right, we'll continue to monitor it. We'll probably have to do a show on. We're going to definitely do a video when we get all the results in as well. And on the other platforms, Alexander, we've been talking about this, and we really have to cover a lot of stuff that's going on in India as well. I mean, there's so much news that we just can't do videos on YouTube about. So anyway, we'll get to all of that in time. Let's bring in Simon.
Hi, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, hello, Simon. Good to hear from you.
Good to see you guys again today, and good news about Scotland. I think looking at the results, we should offer a vote of thanks to Tony Blair, whose wisdom in granting Scotland devolution stripped Labour of so many seats that it's probably virtually impossible for them to ever form a government again. I think that was a wonderful achievement, Tony, and even better news that Hartlepool was lost. I'm sure Peter Two Mortgage Mandelson will be very upset about that.
That was his seat. It was his seat. This is, of course, Peter Mandelson, who was Tony Blair's greatest ally, and of course Hartlepool was his seat. It was his parliamentary constituency. Carry on, Simon.
And Alex, he was twice, I don't think, was he convicted, Alexander, or not? But he was twice involved in mortgage fraud by accepting money from donors.
He was never convicted or prosecuted, but you're absolutely right. And of course, he lied on his mortgage application, and he's got an interesting history. Anyway.
So, I mean, getting to the actual election results itself, I think that people outside the UK probably don't realise how extreme a turn that the Labour Party has taken, because of its takeover by Momentum, which is a Marxist organization. And that's really changed the political makeup of the Labour Party, so that I think even the most loyal Labour voters, my mother included, who literally said she would cut her own arm off before voting for a Tory, actually voted for the Tories in 2019. So I think that there's a major change there. And I think that we need to, people need to realise just how extreme the Labour Party is in the UK. And the Tory party, so often ineffectual, is at least seen as a safe pair of hands. And I think that's one of the reasons they've done so well. As for Scotland, I have a few friends here in Scotland. I've yet to meet a Scottish person who speaks well of the SNP. But I think also that their emphasis on the referendum and the independence referendum has made people in Scotland realise that without the Barnett formula, which is basically a transfer of funds from England to Scotland that takes place every year, then they would start an independent country with an enormous hole in their budget. I think it works out something like 23%, which would be a very expensive thing to deal with.
I think that's absolutely right. I'm going to actually add another point, which is that with every month that passes from now on, I think a second Scottish referendum becomes more problematic. I have consistently taken the view that one of the reasons why nationalism took off so big in Scotland, well, there were many causes. There was devolution, obviously, which gave them a platform and a vehicle, but it was also the fact that Britain was part of the European Union. And it made it possible for people in Scotland to say to themselves, well, look, if we detach ourselves from England, it's not going to make that great a difference because we're all part of the same European Union together. With Britain having left the European Union, Scots are going to have to think much harder about whether they really want to cut themselves off from England, given that England is so important to Scotland in a situation where Scotland also is outside the Union. And given that that is so, that will mean that Scottish voters will want to have representation in London, and that will tend to bind the Union back together again. One of the points to say is that one of the effects of being part of the European Union is that it not only weakens governments, it tends to fragment the countries that form part of it. So you see secessionist movements in Catalonia, in Venice, in all sorts of places, and Scotland is just one example.
I think that's a brilliant point, Alexander. I have to say, I don't think I've ever heard anyone put it quite so succinctly and well. And I think there are the additional consequences of Brexit have been basically how poorly the EU's performed during the pandemic. And also as we're starting to see the economic consequences that has. I mean, I was quite shocked I literally spent some time yesterday looking at national debt figures. And one of the great tragedies of the last 20 years has been what's happened to Greece, a country which I've visited many times and I love dearly. And I think their national debts are approaching 320% of GDP.
Yeah.
But even France is like 118% of GDP.
Yeah.
And now they're also going into a second lockdown and having like major problems. I mean, I would ask, how do you and Alex see that playing out over the next few years?
I'll just say one thing, Alexander, and then I'll let you get to it. Keep in mind that the Greek debt has been at 320 billion since 2010. I mean, it hasn't gone down one bit. It's actually gone up. Anyway,
yeah, it was amazing with all those bailouts. I think I saw the figure
bailouts,
once,
austerity.
I would love to see if it's true that something like of all the bailouts Greece was given, only about 15 billion was actually spent in Greece on the Greek people. and the vast majority of that, the bailout money, was basically repaying debt that had been lent to Greece by major European banks, and then basically retiring that debt to the ECB. So I mean, I have to say, I think that the tragedy is that Greece could have left the euro. It would have gone through 18 months, 2 years of real pain, real suffering. But by now it would have recovered and would be it would be a much more affluent country than it is now. To be honest, I'm surprised it survived as a political entity.
Simon, you're absolutely right. That's exactly my view. I mean, I take that view completely. I would add that, of course, if Greece had never been in the euro system at all, it would never have piled up this debt in the first place, because it wouldn't have been able to borrow in the way that it could. And had it done so, then, of course, it would have done what countries that find themselves in too much debt regularly do. They would have negotiated a restructuring with their creditors, and the IMF would have played a role in it. Now, that might not have been particularly a happy situation, but it would have provided a solution. What instead happened is that there was no restructuring. All the debt was converted from commercial debt to debt owed to the European institutions, which Greece has to go on paying.
The dumbest move in Greek history. Sorry.
The stupidest thing. It was unbelievably stupid. But coming to the European Union and its problems, and you're absolutely right. And by the way, France has now overtaken Italy as the country with the largest debt burden. I mean, it is extraordinary. And the trajectory is awful. And it's true all over Europe. And you see these problems arising everywhere. And I always say, I've been saying this for years, what is unsustainable cannot be sustained. And then the European Union comes along and they come up with some new device, some dodge or trick, which kicks the can a little bit further down the road. And I say to myself, this can't happen. They just can't go on doing this indefinitely. And to my astonishment and dismay, they find ways always to keep it going. Now, I think there will come a point, there has to come a point, where this is going to run out of road. What shape Europe is going to be in by the time that happens, and what form that collapse will take, I simply don't know. But I constantly look at situations, the political situations in individual European countries. I say, well, maybe something will happen in Italy now, or something will happen in France, or something will happen in Germany. And somehow, at the last minute, it's always massaged away. So I think an end will eventually come. What the form of that end will be, I don't know. But what I do think is that if they keep this thing going for very much longer, then of course the collapse, when it comes, will be much more severe than it might otherwise have been if it had been done in a structured and orderly way previously. And we could very well find ourselves not just in a collapse, but in a general systems collapse, which would be very bad indeed. But that seems to me the trajectory of travel. I wish I could be more optimistic about this, but at the moment it is Hotel California and nobody seems to know the way out.
What would you, I mean, I would postulate one potential cause of this could be if the German Constitutional Court rules against the proposed COVID bailout, that might be a triggering event, especially for certain countries like France, like Italy, that are going to be heavily reliant on receiving those bailout funds. So, I mean, I think that's a potential, there's a disaster waiting to happen, basically.
It is, but can I just say again, you see, the German Constitutional Court was a very interesting institution. It's got clearly realizes intellectually that all these things, all these funds and things that have been set up contradict the treaties and they contradict the German constitution. And they come very close. They were doing so last year, I remember. They come very close to making what we all expect to be the final judgment that's going to put this whole thing finally to an end. And then they draw back and they say we're giving the government more time, and we're giving, we're looking for assurances. And again, they manage somehow to avoid making that judgment, which you sense in deep down they know they should make, but they never have the political courage to make it. And of course, that makes the situation worse. I know Germany quite well. I know the mood there. I know how sour it's getting. And perhaps the break will come in Germany. Whether it will come from the German Constitutional Court, I don't know. But I suspect we're going to have elections in September in Germany. Probably the Greens will do well, which is a frightening idea, actually, dare I say it. But, maybe they will. And maybe the result of that will be an unraveling at the German center. Or maybe there will be elections in France. Maybe Le Pen will win them. Maybe she will do some of the things she's in the past said she would do. But we will see. But sooner or later, something will happen. Either it will happen at the level of politics, either it will be at the level of some court decision, either it will be an event in the markets or the greater economy. I don't know. But I still feel instinctively that something that doesn't work can't be made to work. And what is unsustainable in the end cannot be sustained.
Well, I think you're right. And this gets me on to another area that I wanted to discuss with you. And one, if I might be so bold, I would suggest that you consider producing a video on that. Many years ago, I was working for a publication that worked in the insurance and reinsurance industry. And I was working on a project with Lloyd's of London, the insurance institution. And I remember having a conversation with an accountant who was a specialist there. And being the sort of person that I am, I was asking him fairly searching questions because he was a very talkative and very informed person. And when the Lloyd's market collapsed, I said, "Oh, there must have been very traumatic episode here, and you must have seen many of the underwriters here lose substantial sums of money." Just to give people background, Lloyd's had a very bizarre funding system called names, where you would be allowed to invest, and you had unlimited liability. So that if your net wealth was £10 million, you could literally lose £10 million if you'd backed the wrong underwriter. And he laughed when I said that to him, and he said, "None of them lost money." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Do you really think that's how the market works?" And I said, "Well, yes, surely they must have been involved in these syndicates, etc." He said, "No." He said, "Smart money always knows." And I'm planning to make some investments myself, and I've been looking around the market recently, and I've seen some very, very interesting things. And I kind of made a list. The foreign holdings of dollar assets is down to 1995 levels. Hedge funds have been net sellers, have been the largest net sellers of US stocks for the last few months. The level of stocks bought on margin is the highest it's ever been in history.
Yeah, I've heard that
even higher than 1929. And perhaps most interesting of all, the manipulation that's been taking place in the gold market. You can actually look at the gold ETFs that the banks are offering. That surged almost 300% in the last year. So that there is a deliberate attempt to basically reduce any increases in the price of gold. So as soon as the gold price starts moving up, more of these ETFs are generated. So effectively, it's more paper gold. And I think what we're seeing the final stages of an unprecedented economic boom generated by a very, very loose monetary policy. And the smart money is now moving for the door. And that makes me think I didn't think the reckoning would come until next year, but I think it may actually come much sooner than that, because I think these people are far more aware than any of us of what's really going on in the marketplace.
I think you may be right. Now, I'm not somebody who's involved in financial markets, but again, I know people who are, and some of them are very concerned about the situation, and some of them I know are talking about things beginning to go wrong in the autumn. Well, we shall see.
Well, I think so, but it's literally today the figures for employment came out in the US, and they were very disappointing. Yes, yes, Alex. But also, one of the things that's very interesting, and even in states where there haven't been lockdowns, the service economy isn't working at full capacity. And that isn't because of any COVID-related restrictions or anything like that. It is because it is far more beneficial for workers to not be working, to take their government checks, than it is to actually go in and work and get paid. So you have a highly inflationary environment where commodity prices are going through the roof. The latest figure I saw for timber in the US, it's gone up 320% in a year. But the ability to correct for that by increasing productive capacity is being restricted by the actions of the government itself with the various stimulus packages they've introduced. So people often talk about the Weimar Republic. Well, the Weimar Republic wasn't in that position. They were not paying people not to work productively. And I think that inflation in the US, I mean, the CPI annualized rate is now 4.6%. And the CPI rate doesn't include things like housing costs. And I don't think it includes a lot of energy costs. I don't think it includes things like gasoline. So you are getting a possible perfect storm of events where you have high inflation, a collapsing economy, and then also because of something I recently heard, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, the Triffin dilemma.
No, I haven't heard of it.
It's something that was originally put forward in the 1960s, and the Triffin dilemma was that if you have the global reserve currency, then you will not always operate and manage your currency in the best domestic interests of your country, but you will have to take actions that are not in the best interest of your country, but are essential if you are to retain the reserve currency status of your currency. So if you could actually say this is really why the US is in the position it is today, that it has, because it's the global reserve currency, it effectively always has to have a trade deficit to provide enough dollars for the world to function and the global trading system to function. But that weakens the domestic economy, has hammered the United States working and middle classes into almost non-existence, and thereby also made the country itself much, much weaker economically and militarily and politically. And I think it's a fascinating dilemma that was actually pointed out by John Maynard Keynes, who postulated an alternative to the dollar at the Bretton Woods Accords. And I should think there'll be a lot of Americans in a year's time, who'd wish that they'd gone with what John Maynard Keynes had suggested, rather than having the dollar as a reserve currency.
That's all very, very interesting. And thank you, Simon. Can I just say one point where I don't actually agree with you is about Weimar, because the Weimar government did, in fact, pay people in Germany not to work. It actually called a general strike when the French troops went into the Ruhr, because in order to enforce reparation payments, called a general strike and then continued to pay people to not work. And the result was hyperinflation.
Actually, you're completely right, Alexander. You're completely right. I know. I've literally only read about that a few months ago, but I completely forgotten that episode. So it is it's fascinating to watch, but it's absolutely terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, the moment it happens at terrifying speed. That is the other thing about these sort of problems. I mean, they come on you much faster than you expect.
When it happens, guys, and I've lived it twice. I've lived it with Greece and I lived it with Cyprus.
Yeah.
Guys, literally, you go to sleep on a Friday night, and I'm not exaggerating. You go to sleep on a Friday night and you think all your money is fine and safe. And you wake up on a Saturday and you go to a coffee shop across the street, and this is my story, and you see everyone talking at the coffee shop and whispering and chatting, and people are panicking, and you ask, what the hell's going on? And you want to know what they say? The European Union just came in. They took our money from the bank. They shut down the second biggest bank. It's all gone with the stroke of a key. Boom. Everything's gone. So when it comes fast, it's going to come very, very fast. And the people, you're right, Simon, the people that know how to move money and have a lot of money, they're already out.
Yeah.
They're already gone.
Yeah.
They're done.
Yeah,
it's the rest of us that are going to be holding the bags.
Well, I think that's right, Alex. I was actually working for a credit reference. I think I mentioned this before. I was working for a credit reference agency during the financial crash. And I was getting calls from my clients saying, what's going on? What do you think I should do? And I was literally saying, make sure you have up to the insured amount you have no more than the insured amount in a bank. But I said, if you can do anything to have less than that in your bank, that's wise. And personally, I took all my money out of the bank, and for about 3 months, I literally had it in my home. Because, I mean, people do not realize how close we came. If we hadn't had, I mean, Alistair Darling wasn't the world's greatest chancellor, but I think he did a pretty good job during the financial crisis. Yeah. And I think if he hadn't taken the steps he had done, it would have been absolutely catastrophic. But I don't see that happening in the US. I really don't. I think that they are so committed to this course, and they've been on this course for almost 13 years. And the fact is that if they have to start raising interest rates and start running a proper monetary policy and start cutting spending, I mean, it's incredible to me. The United States has not passed a budget in Congress in 20 years. I mean, I used to laugh at Belgium for not having a government for like, was it 2 or 3 years? But if you cannot pass a budget, you don't have a functioning government.
No.
But I mean, I think that's all I want to cover. I would like to see a video also on what is happening in Greece, because I think that doesn't receive nearly as much coverage as it should. And I really want to go back to Greece again. I love traveling around the ancient sites. Last time I went there, I went to the Peloponnese and went to Mycenae and visited. I think I didn't go to Delphi. Where did I go? Olympia. That's it. Which was absolutely marvelous. They were having a Greek play put on there. And all these celebrities were coming in, of course, who I didn't know who they were, but getting rounds of applause. But it's such a beautiful and wonderful country, and it's such a tragedy what's happened to it. That I would love to go again, but I just think how different it will be now to how it was then, since I haven't been there for probably about 15 years.
Yeah, very different.
Very different. Yeah,
very different. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot.
Not in a good way. All right. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Take care.
Take care.
Yeah, we'll definitely do more videos on what's going on in Europe and in Greece and France. And there's a lot of bad stuff on the horizon.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin. Bitcoin, guys. All right. Not financial advice. All right. Let's go to let's see. We got Zahir, Alex, Zariel, and Ferdy, and we'll wrap it up there. Zahir, are you with us? This has become tradition. All right, Zahir, we'll come back to Zahir.
We'll come back to Zahir later.
Oh boy. All right, let's go to Alex. Alex, you're on stream.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Very
we
well.
can hear you,
Hello,
Alex.
Alex.
Yes.
Okay, nice. Good evening to you. Good evening to all the Duraners out there. I want to discuss two things today. The first thing is about Nord Stream 2, right? And I believe this point was already brought up by someone. I believe a gentleman in Canada a couple of weeks ago on this show. But the discussion all sort of trickled down to the Green Party in Germany gaining traction. So the thing I want to ask is concerns contractual obligations of companies which pulled out of Nord Stream 2. And I was just wondering, are there no contractual penalties for companies who pulled out of the project in fear of being sanctioned by the US? Because if there aren't, well, it's a bit weird. I mean, you can argue that maybe sanctions could be a force majeure case for these companies, but I wouldn't argue that. I don't think it is like that. I mean, they entered the contract in good faith, and they should have delivered. And if they are not delivering, then Russia or the company or whatever company entity is building and commissioning this project on their behalf, they should be able to, sue them. Maybe they go to arbitration. They probably have, they should have an arbitration clause in London or into Sweden, and to bring legal claims against these companies. So are you aware of anything in this regard?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been widely discussed and much talked about. If Nord Stream 2 is simply cancelled, the compensation claims that Gazprom and other Russian suppliers could make would be enormous. They would run into billions. And that's one reason, by the way, that why many German companies and investors who've been piled into Nord Stream 2 are very anxious to see it completed, because they don't want to be put in that kind of position. Now, if there are sanctions, if the United States, for example, were to impose the kind of sanctions that would make carrying out Nord Stream 2 impossible, yes, then I could just about see that a force majeure argument might just be sustainable. Still be difficult in legal terms, but I could still see how it might be. You could argue that we can't carry it through because even though we have contractual obligations to you, we would be put in such an impossible position by the United States that we have no effective alternative but to pull out. It would be a difficult argument, but I could just see it. But if you have a Green government come elected in September and they say, well, we're stopping Nord Stream 2 because we don't like it. We think it's going to do all sorts of damage to the marine life and to the environment and to all that kind of thing. Well, of course, in that case, force majeure does not apply. And at that point, all those compensation claims, which you're talking about, Alexander, will come into force and come into force with a vengeance. That's why, by the way, even if the Greens win in September, I think it is unlikely that they would end Nord Stream 2, because God help us, there would be all hell to play in legal terms. But beyond that, anyway, I think that they would need to form a coalition government with other parties, probably the SPD, possibly the FDP, conceivably even Die Linke, all of which, for various reasons, support Nord Stream 2. So I just don't think it's going to happen if the Greens win. And the points about compensation that you make are absolutely valid. I ought to say, by the way, that there is a court case underway in Germany at the moment, which has been brought by an ecological group, and they're trying to stop Nord Stream 2 on the basis that it's dangerous to the marine life of the Baltic Sea. This is despite the fact that the regulator has said that this isn't the case. I understand virtually everybody who is involved in that case expects the administrative court to rule against the ecological group. And in the meantime, apparently work on the project is still continuing. And the world being as it is, some people do wonder whether this ecological group is quite what it pretends to be. But that's another story. But there's still this sniping that goes on around the edges. And by the way, if that ecological group were to win, and if Nord Stream 2 were to be blocked for that reason, then of course all the compensation claims which we've been talking about would absolutely apply, because in that case, obviously, a contract would have been entered into in good faith. There would be no question of sanctions, no question of force majeure, and at that point, you would be able, the Gazprom and its Russian partners would be able to bring all the claims that they wanted to bring with high prospects of success.
Yes, I do hope you are right, because for the sake of international commerce and legal certainty, it has to be like that. Because when I was reading all these news about Nord Stream 2, I was just thinking, am I missing something? How can you just unilaterally pull out of a project like that with absolutely no penalty? And you know, if they somehow escape liability, then this will set a very dangerous precedent where one country, specifically United States, can do all sorts of extraordinary things with the sanction weapon, allowing companies to pull out of projects here and there without any sort of penalty. This is detrimental to legal certainty and global commerce. This must not stand. They must, I'm not picking sides here. For the sake of legal certainty, you have to either deliver or pay the compensation and maybe the damages too.
Alexander, you're absolutely right, but I'm afraid I have to give you a cautionary note, because, of course, in Ukraine-related litigation, all those points that you've made absolutely apply, and yet things have worked otherwise. I mean, I'm sure you remember that there was a case some years ago where Russia loaned to President Yanukovych's government in Ukraine $3 billion. And Ukraine defaulted on that, and those that loan was secured through contracts made in England and supposedly enforceable in the English High Court. So the Russians brought a claim to get their money back, and it succeeded on appeal because it succeeded in the High Court because realistically there was absolutely no conceivable argument against it. And then Ukraine appealed, and the whole case has just got basically going nowhere because it seems to be bogged down in appeal processes. So that looked like a clear-cut case, and yet obviously politics, and I'm going to be straightforward about it, intervened. They didn't want to have Ukraine declared in default, because if it did, that would have stopped all the IMF funding, and they found a way of simply prolonging the case indefinitely so that Ukraine could avoid being in technical default and could receive IMF funding. And then there was another case when Gazprom brought a claim against Ukraine, and Ukraine over payment for gas deliveries, and Ukraine counterclaimed, and it went to the Stockholm Arbitration Court, and the Stockholm Arbitration Court decided on every conceivable legal point that was really at issue in Gazprom's favor, and then it still went ahead and extinguished Gazprom's award and said that Gazprom owed Naftogaz, Ukraine's company, money because these actions had somehow, because this was necessary to help the Ukrainian economy, which is legal reasoning I've never seen before in my life. So yes, all the points we've been making about Nord Stream 2, they are exactly as clear-cut as you have said. But unfortunately, the days when one could rely on courts in the West, the Stockholm Arbitration Court in Stockholm, the High Court and the Court of Appeal in England, and the Supreme Court in England, to apply the law impartially and put politics to one side, well, that doesn't seem to be quite the case any longer. I still think that with Nord Stream 2, it would be different, but who's to say?
Yes. Well, maybe we can write off Ukraine really as a basket case, because, you know, money always enters Ukraine, but it never leaves, as it seems. Right. But I just hope that the Russians exercise and exhaust all the possible legal possibilities available, because it's just, you know, it's if they don't do so, if they just sort of back off, which is really undesirable, it'll be reminiscent of the doping scandal a couple of years ago, where a lot of people, including in Russia, were pushing Russians to file a claim after a claim, including civil claims against all these bogus allegations, and they are really legally illiterate. The Russians, they might have a brilliant institution of diplomacy, but when it comes to legal matters, they're not really that skillful, and definitely not close to any other Western country, let alone the United States, who really are masters of litigation. They've got all sorts of legal levers available. So I guess the moral of the story is that when you're undertaking such a large project, $11 billion project, you need to have an option B, a legal option, a good option, so that things like these don't happen. You owe it to yourself, really.
You are totally right about what you've just said. The Russians are awful at this sort of thing. One of the reasons is that they don't have good commercial lawyers of their own. So in these sort of claims, and they tend to rely on Western, usually British law firms. And that is never a clever thing to do. Not because these law firms aren't, sometimes perfectly good law firms, but of course, if they're British, they come under all kinds of pressures themselves. So you're absolutely right that your observation is spot on. The closest analogy, by the way, I think one of the things that would give the Russians a strong position on Nord Stream 2 is that the Germans have effectively admitted that they would have to pay compensation if it was cancelled. So it's difficult to see how they would go behind that. But anyway, you had a second point, I think.
Yeah. So second point, just another brief observation, and about all this censorship thing, and in the media and in social media about labels and stuff. I just think that it's getting a bit out of hand in a way that the concept of the concept of peer reviewing is basically being killed off, so that we have a designated person. Maybe he's a a certain tech billionaire we're all aware of, or maybe a company, or maybe a certain government, and what they say is official information. And it's not subject to peer review, right? It's because we've seen so many people. I've seen so many people who are, even doctors who are qualified people who would like to give their opinion on a certain medication or a certain situation and things like that, but they're getting immediately shut down on the grounds that they're spreading misinformation. So basically, can you imagine in a university campus situation, or in university, for example, where you are not allowed to peer review someone in order to, first of all, peer reviewing also helps the person who is being peer reviewed, because this is you're helping them improve, because the person who's being peer reviewed, well, he's supposed to be always right. You're not supposed to point out that he's wrong, or God forbid you hurt his or her feelings while doing so. And I think that we need to value and preserve the concept of peer reviewing. That comes in a form of criticizing the government too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the whole situation is it's deplorable. I mean, look, we've talked. We are particularly exposed to this sort of thing because of the sort of work we do. But all I will say is this, and I could say a lot more, but again, we have to be careful what we say, which is astonishing, even discussing this topic, especially discussing this topic. But I would never once have believed that in the United States, in Britain, in the West, we would find ourselves in this position. And here we are. I mean, I can't say more than that, but it's awful.
Yes, it's awful. Well, thank you for taking my call. It was a pleasure to speak to you. And until next time, I suppose.
No.
Yep. Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. All right, let's take, who do we got? Zariel and Ferdy. Zariel, you're coming into the stream.
Good
Zariel.
evening.
Yes, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Well, very well, Zariel.
Well, let's start off. I wanted to actually make some very, very short points, but after hearing what Simon just said, unbelievable. I just love listening to him. Very, very insightful gentleman. Let's start off. Vindicate Snowden, free Assange, and free speech, gentlemen. Free speech. for the past couple of years, I've been hearing you saying you have to be very careful about what you have to say here, or we know what the consequences will be. So much free speech. Also, all of the downing, the removal of different people from different platforms worldwide. I mean, it's insane. I just realized actually this week and last week I was unsubscribed from both of your channels. Like to just make a shout out to everyone who has a subscription to your channels. Check them. Yes. Next point. Hit the like button, gentlemen and ladies. Hit the like button. Have you gentlemen ever read the book, The Fourth Turning by Neil Ho and William Strauss?
I have not. I've not heard of. I've not read it.
I have not.
Highly recommend it. It's actually referring to the situation that we are living through at the moment. This woke and new world order stuff that that we're experiencing. It's always in cycles. And if you follow history, these gentlemen, I have been following history for quite some time also, and these gentlemen actually wrote it in a very, very well explained way of what cycle we're in, what turning, as they put it, we're in right now, and the decadence that we are seeing is a symptom of these times. As I said, I can recommend that to you if you'd like to, if you can get to it.
The fourth turning.
The Fourth Turning by Neil Ho, Howe, and William Strauss. Coming of course to that point, you were just talking about the breaking point, how it's always been avoided to a certain, it builds up, the tension builds up, and then the governments do something, or those who have the power do something to try and ease the situation, because we know that the breaking point is coming. We don't know when it will be. You spoke about the German Constitutional Court, or actually Simon was referred to that, and you were saying that they haven't really moved. I just say, I am German, so I'm just saying, don't hold your breath on that.
I agree with that completely. I mean, I've been burnt on this. We've even done videos on this in which I've been saying, if you go back, that I thought, this is going to be the break. This is going to be the moment when it was going to do something, and it always backs away. I mean, it's quite depressing to see these, learned people of the law. And, one can sense that deep down they know what they should do, but they always pull back at the last moment.
Yeah. When the breaking point comes, Alexander, as you said, I don't think it will be coming from the Constitutional Court. I don't think it will be coming from the government. I don't think it will be coming from any of the establishment. I do believe that the breaking point will come probably at this election in Germany,
Right.
which... yes, even living in Switzerland, I will be participating in that one, because the Greens, we definitely know that they cannot achieve the majority. We don't want them to. God help the country if they do. We do know that CSU is going to get a tremendous slap, not on the wrist, but probably in the face. The traffic light coalition, no one really expects anything to happen. I do expect, to be honest, to see a very large move in the direction of the Linke, which is the left party, and also the AfD, the alternative for Germany. It's going to be a very big mix-up, because the German population is fed up.
Yeah,
they have absolutely just had enough of this political moving back and forth. And with the situation that we've been in for the past 1.5 years, we're not going to get into that topic either.
I agree with your assessment, by the way. Except I'm very interested to see that you think that Die Linke and the AfD might actually strengthen. Well, I think I'm right in saying that there's an important regional election coming up in which the AfD is making a challenge. But anyway, that's not the trend of what I've been hearing people say. But people who've been telling me that otherwise, that Die Linke and the AfD are weakening rather than strengthening, what they all have in common is that none of them have any connection to Germany. So, you know, I'm very interested in what you've just told me.
Okay, well, we just had a regional election in Baden-Württemberg, and of course, the Greens got in again. So that is Baden-Württemberg being the second largest state in the German Federation. It is a sign. Of course, we also have Bavaria, which is the largest, and the CSU is the major party there. They always will remain the major party there. No surprise. But we have the new states, the five, we call it the new states, the ex-Eastern Bloc states. And the people there are very pragmatic. So I don't see, they are fed up with Merkel, and she's one of them. Let's put the facts on the table. She has really screwed the country up so bad that they have lost the faith of the at least East German population, as well as the southern part of Germany. Next comment I'd just like to make, you know, when it came to the Weimar Republic and the payments, I just wrote it here in the chat also. I think this bubble that is going to come, that we've been discussing, this whole thing, I think is actually going to be the forebearer for the UBI. I think it's going to be facilitated for the facilitation by the governments for unemployment funds to be just handed out. I've been seeing this since, since 1996, 95, when I was in the army. The money movement in the German government to the refugees, etc., etc., and it's just been going on ever since. So this whole bubble that is just being built up is too big to fail. We know that, and the bail-in that will happen is going to happen, as Alex said, it's going to happen very fast. It is not going to be located in one single country. It's going to be either continentally or even globally. So I have my thoughts about that. You know what the thoughts are, and I just you know, say beware, be vigilant to everyone. You know, look at the markets. Anyone who really just looks at it for a certain amount of time can see it, can see what's happening. A last comment to the European situation, or even the world situation, the global situation. There is a great German Lebanese filmmaker. His name is Imad Karim, who put it just this year in April 2021. He just made a movie, or a small movie. It's on YouTube. Sadly, it's only in German. If you could get that translated, I would also recommend it, because he speaks about the decadence that we're going through and what has been created by the whole situation in the Middle East, Far East, the refugee camps, etc. And it has to be paid by someone, and that's of course the working class. You see this in Britain, you see this in the United States, in Germany, in France. So yeah.
I've heard of him. I will try and I've watched his films and watched films for a long time, actually. So I will try and catch up with this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sadly that, as I said, it's only in German, so you really have to have someone translate it for you. But he brings it to a point, and from a person who comes from Lebanon years ago, who was integrated into the German population. I mean, he has more or less become a German himself. For him to actually tell the Germans, we know that Germany is still financially the market in Europe. For him to have to tell the Germans or the Europeans what is happening, I mean, is an eye opener.
Yeah.
So I recommend that also to you.
Right.
Keeping it very short. Have a great weekend, gentlemen. Thank you as usual.
Thank you, Zariel.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Can't hear you, Alex.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
From what Zariel was saying, you know, after all these restrictions and the lockdowns and everything that's going on, and the inflation, the money printing, man, the bill's going to come for all of this stuff. You know, the bill is going to come. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but after looking at the jobs report that came out and everything that's going on, and it's going to be brutal.
Yes.
Boy,
Yes.
buckle up.
Maybe one shouldn't laugh, but seriously, no, I absolutely agree.
I laugh in the sense of, buckle up, up, everybody. Yeah. All right, let's bring in Ferdy. Ferdy, you are up.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Very
Good.
well.
How are you doing?
I have to say again, I mean, the informativeness of the call in participants is incredible. I'm in awe. My question is, and I would like to have your opinion to that. I was trying to make sense of all this situation in your financial situation in Europe, and I thought if maybe the reason for the financial dependencies of the countries to the supranational organizations, would it be sort of a clandestine preparation of the EU for the, the prophecies of this Davos guy, quote unquote, owning nothing and being happy? If that will be a preparation for that agenda. That, I mean, we had other organizations going into poorer countries with the promise of help and making them totally dependent, and then bringing them to the point that they can't pay their debts anymore, and then for compensation make them change their policies and change the policies so that the supranational organizations have their say and their influence there. I'm trying to express myself very.
I understand you, and I'm grateful to you for doing it that way, and I think we both are actually. But I think there is that agenda, at least certainly I think there is. To what extent it is the dominant agenda, I'm not sure, but I have no doubt that there are people who think in exactly that way, and the particular person perhaps you might have had in mind, I'm sure he does think that way.
And they're all coming to him for advice, so all the politicians.
Well, indeed.
Yeah.
Because he's an expert on everything, you see.
And everything, yeah. I think in my eyes, he's a total lunatic. Anyway.
Think about it. We didn't know anything about him. Well, most of the world didn't know anything about him. What, 2 years ago? If you had said the name, people would have been like, "Who? What?"
As far as I'm informed, his son or one of his sons is a CEO of a big company in China, obviously.
Yeah.
Anyway, my second question is about Bitcoin. I don't know anything about finance and things. How secure do you think it is? I heard several stories of people being hacked and losing their money totally.
It's you're your own. You're responsible for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say it more simply. It's trustless. That's good. It's decentralized. That's good. Bitcoin, Ether, all kinds of the whole crypto space. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're your own bank. A lot of people say that you're your own bank, but it's true. You're in charge of it. And
yes, but how secure are you against?
It depends where you store it. It depends where you store it and how you manage it. And it could be extremely super secure.
Okay.
I mean, to the point of you don't have to worry one bit about it if you do it right, and if you're very vigilant. And it could be to the point of people can jump in and scam you from it. So, I mean, it's a learning process, but it's not hard. I mean, it's not anything that you can't get from the internet and learn.
I have tried
and watch videos about it. And there's a lot of great advice.
I have tried to listen to many, some videos, but it was too high for me.
No, there's some great, I'll throw some real quick shout outs. Coin Bureau is good. Journey Crypto is good. Cultivate Crypto, all good channels. All very knowledgeable, all very grounded. They're conservative. They don't give crazy advice. They're very careful in what they say, and it's very fun to watch these guys. Actually, they're very easy to understand. So,
Can you write that down in the chat?
I'll put it into the chat. Yes, I'll write it into the chat.
Well, that So that's it already. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Fred.
All the best to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Freddie. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Let's see. Zahir. Let's put Zahir in. Let's see if he's with us. Zahir, are you with us? Zahir. All right.
Okay.
Zahir's out. All right, Alexander. Great calls, guys.
Absolutely.
Really good calls. Let's do some more super chats. We've got great questions. From Hunger, $5 super chat. Hot take. Labour hasn't lost. The Tories have just become more indistinguishable from Tony Blair and the New Left.
There's a great deal of truth to that, actually. I mean, the Conservative Party has also moved considerably to the left, and especially, I mean, Johnson is trying to position himself very much as a sort of centrist. I think the danger of Merkelism in Britain is a very, very real one. I once remember a rather grand personage saying to me that the best kind of solution for Britain was a Conservative government and an old Labour opposition, and that created a kind of tension. But if we have a centrist, one single centrist party, which is not hugely, strongly supported, then, as I said, that could easily result in a very stagnant situation in Britain too. And I really do hope we don't get that, because that would be very unprecedented in our history. We would never have had anything like that before.
All right. Let's see. Oh, we have Claude. Let's bring in Claude, and we'll get to some more super chats after that. Let's see if Claude is with us. He'll wrap it up. Claude will wrap it up. Are you with us, Claude? Are you with us, Claude?
Hi, guys.
Hello,
how you
Claude.
doing?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Once again, Claude, you followed after Zahir, actually.
Yeah, it's I guess
Tradition.
I just finished work for the week, so I guess it's pretty much how it times out usually. So, what a week, eh?
Well, indeed.
Gets better and better.
Wow.
or worse and worse, whichever way you want to look at it.
I was thinking of something yesterday I wanted to mention to you guys, and I was listening to Lavrov's interview with the Russian media this week. I think Alexander made a couple really cool YouTube videos about it, and I was trying to connect the dots. Who's he talking to? What's he talking about? And so there was especially a line where he said where UK was pressuring European EU countries to cut ties with Russia while they were, underhandedly trying to create back channels and so forth. And all I could think of was the Russians know that they're gonna the Germans have told the Russians that they won't be allowed to bring on Nord Stream online. They know by now, because this is not good for Germany. It really isn't. I'm sure that's not what they wanted, and I think they're stuck. They're stuck between the U.S. and the U.K. and the French and everybody pressuring them to lock this thing down, and the Russians obviously know by now, because if you were the Germans, you would let the Russians know ahead of time what's going on, because the last thing you would want to do is catch them off guard, and then you have no diplomatic channels left, right?
Yeah.
And it's you remember when Obama was caught spying on Merkel and her government? It's the Americans have never trusted the Germans with the Russians, and I don't know where this goes, because I was going to ask. I heard on the show today. We hear everything on this show, which is awesome. But it's $11 billion investment by the Russians for Nord Stream 2. So there's no way they can take this line down. If this happens, my guess is the Russians are just going to completely cut off Europe from its gas. And China will absorb the difference, just because that's how these two countries are working together now. Not that they need it, but they can afford to absorb that those lost sales that Russia, at least for a while, anyways. And then it's really interesting to see where it goes after that.
Well, yes, I mean, $11 billion is a huge amount of money, but bear in mind that it's less than with the present state of the oil market. Russia increased its financial reserves by just over the course of 1 week. So it's a lot of money in the round. It would be, big court cases. If Germany pulls out of Nord Stream 2, you can imagine a vast flurry of court cases that will happen like night follows day. The Russians will be extremely angry because they weren't minded. It wasn't their idea to build Nord Stream 2.
No, it was the Germans.
It was the Germans came along, and Merkel herself, and they talked them into doing it at a time when the Russians had decided not to build more pipelines to Europe because of the political problems.
There was a lot of coaxing. I remember there was a lot of coaxing involved by the Germans about energy security and all that stuff, and it took 3 or 4 long, negotiations with the Russians to get this going. So that's why I say Germany looks really bad. Merkel looks really bad if she's twisted into interrupting Nord Stream or not letting it, because it's basically built. So you're basically telling the Russians, okay, you spent the money, you built it, now because you're not nice with Navalny or whatever the flavor of the week is, you see a very intense Lavrov Lavrov was on a mission in that interview. Putin has been on a mission the last month or so. There's something really ugly brewing here.
Oh, I entirely agree with that. I mean, by the way, I should say on my own channel, I've done 2 separate videos on that interview that Lavrov gave. One which is looking at, an overview of it. One specifically on that a very remarkable comment that he made about the fact that the British at one and the same time are telling other European countries to scale down their relations with Russia, whilst at the same time telling the Russians that the Britain wants to increase its contacts with Russia. And I said that, that the point that you made, that there's always nervousness both in Washington and London about the Germans and the Russians getting too close. That is absolutely true, and that may very well be a part of it all. There's a famous comment made by the first ever Secretary General of NATO, who was British, Lord Ismay, in which he said that the point of NATO was to keep the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. And you can understand from a British point of view how that might work. How if you're thinking of it from the perspective of a British establishment figure, this is the kind of policy the British want to play. Don't get a situation where the Germans and the Russians are working too closely with each other. But as I also said in that program, the British are playing that very complicated game. And it's important to stress we only have Lavrov's words that they are. I mean, he might have just been mischievous when he said it. But assuming that is true, assuming the British are reaching out to the Russians at the same time as they're telling everybody else to scale down their contacts with the Russians, then it's a very dangerous game the British are playing. And to come back to your original question, maybe that interview that Lavrov gave was intended to alert the other Europeans, and especially the Germans, to what is going on. That may have been one purpose. Maybe it was also to alert the British to the fact that the Russians know exactly what the British are up to. And the interview overall was clearly, in large measure, addressed to the United States and to Britain and to the Western powers. It was basically saying Russia has its red lines. Russia's not going to be intimidated. Russia is not going to be pressured. We're going to stick to our positions. We don't fear your sanctions. We have decided that your threats of war in Ukraine are all bluff. That word was actually used over the course of that interview, and that was really the purpose of it all. Also, of course, it was partly intended to keep Russians informed. By the way, the Russian population takes a great interest in Russian foreign policy, perhaps more than is the case in some Western countries.
Well, they know the history, so
They do know
they know how potentially dangerous things can get, and how quickly things can fall apart.
Yes.
But when I was really fascinated by Lavrov's. I've always been a fan of his as a statesman, and it's the first time I saw him on the verge of losing his composure. If you watch the interview again, you'll see how he advances his upper body. He's hot under the collar. He's got a hard time keeping it in check. He was angry.
Oh, of course.
There was, and the more he talked, the more he was winding himself up. And I've never seen him like that before.
No, I know. I agree. I completely agree. I have never known the Russians to be as angry as they are at the moment. I mean, they've always been very composed and very contained. But over the last few months, Lavrov has been giving interview after interview in which he's been making his feelings absolutely clear. And of course, we had that extraordinary speech from Putin in which he talked about red lines and actually gave a warning about Russia taking asymmetrical action if those red lines were crossed. And of course, a warning can be interpreted also as a threat. So the Russians are very, very angry. I think the Navalny affair has played a big role in that. I think they were deeply, deeply angered that a project of the scale of Nord Stream 2 could be put in jeopardy by an episode which I think they see as frankly farcical. I think they're also very angry by the attempts to interfere and meddle in their internal affairs, which is what the Navalny affair was all about. But I think also, and I do get this sense, that a very, very big thing happened in the first half of this year, the first quarter of this year. I think all those movements of troops and fleets and plots of coups in Belarus are things that we only know about on the surface. I think probably lots more things were going on.
Well, he touched on this. If you remember in the conversation, he said how the Russians had talked about, Putin had spoken with Biden, and they had pulled their troops back. He kind of associated the conversation with the Russians agreeing to, pull some troops back off the border to calm things down. And he says the thanks we got for that was more propaganda and calling us that, cowards and we're backing down and that kind of stuff. He's really showing out. He's giving a lot of background there. And
absolutely. I mean, that was the other thing. It was a very the amount of information he was giving away about what goes on in discussions is really quite extraordinary. Again, I've never seen anything like that happen before.
No.
But I mean, he was talking quite openly about some of the things that are said in private discussions, and his talk about the Europeans, the Germans, and the French was astonishing. Actually, exposing how weak they were in negotiations and how they are and how shamefaced they are as they admit repeatedly that they can't fulfill promises that they've made. But it was all very, very interesting, and I do think, as I said, something very big happened this year. I think that, as I said, I suspect that with the new administration, some people in Washington and London and Brussels thought that this was the moment to make a big push. It all unraveled in all kinds of ways, and it's left the Russians very angry. I should say that yesterday I was following a very, very interesting discussion that Ray McGovern, who was, of course, he's the chair of VIPS, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, had with a very, very knowledgeable Russian academic called Vladimir Kozin. Now, Kozin is an interesting man because he teaches, amongst other places, at the Russian General Staff Academy, and he's got a lot of contacts with the senior military people. And he also said that we got to a very dangerous point this April. And, that was something I'd already suspected. But you had a person who from a Russian side would probably know. And he actually said that in that discussion. So again, I wonder what the whole story is. One day, 50, 100 years from now, we'll probably know the answer. But something very big happened, I believe, in the first half of this year, the first couple of months of this year.
Yeah, and it involves the United States and a few others.
Absolutely.
And I feel for this Zelensky character. He must miss the comedy. He must miss the comedy clubs. But he's stuck in a really bad spot right now because you can see the Americans manipulating him, and he's got the Minsk Accord that the Europeans are enforcing on him, and then he's got the Americans pressuring him to ignore it and break it. And where does this guy go? I mean, he's got all, and we know these neo-Nazi militias in Kiev. Anybody who's followed the story from the beginning, those are actually real. So it's true that he has this domestic issue that he's got to deal with at the same time. So that's an unmanageable.
Absolutely. By the way, Lavrov said some appalling things about Zelensky. He clearly considers him a total clown, and he even said that he'd watched with amusement Zelensky's TV role, servant of the people, and that perhaps Zelensky should rediscover that earlier persona of himself.
Well, I mean,
it's about as scathing as you could get, but there we go.
Asking Putin to meet him in the Donbass was an insane. It was completely insane.
Well, now it's the Vatican, apparently.
Okay.
That's Zelensky's latest idea, is that they meet in the Vatican. So there you go.
Gentlemen, have a great weekend as usual.
Thank you, Claude.
Take care, Claude.
Bye, Alex.
Bye-bye. Take care. All right, Alexander. Let's see. Fiona, new member to the drag community. Welcome, Fiona. Great to have you here. Pogue 1999 super chat gets to a point I made a couple of weeks ago about the lack of viable opposition in the UK. Surprised at the number of people who voted for Labour given the lockdown. Interesting.
It's a very good point, actually. And yes, I mean, the Labour Party over the last year has basically stopped opposing. It's got no conception of its role as an opposition. If there's been a parliamentary debate on the pandemic, a debate in Parliament, I mean, I missed it, frankly. I don't think there has been one, but if one did take place, it would have been such a soporific affair that I don't think anybody noticed. Labour is not functioning. It has ceased to be a functional party in any true sense. There are some people who have these ideas, which, as I said, would be very attractive in San Francisco and have their traction in North London, but they're not popular across the country as a whole.
All right, we'll do some more super chats, and I think I see Zahir and Alec. I see two people in the live call. Zahir, Alexandra. We'll get to you guys. We'll do some more super chats, and we'll get to those calls to wrap it up. And then we'll take these two calls. From Utnosens, what do you think about Lawrence Fox, about his attempt in London elections and the conservative movement he or others seems to be trying to build?
Well, he is trying to build, but at the moment, I think the Conservative Party is so dominant that there isn't very much space for people like that. If things change, then things could change. Then that might, space for that sort of thing might arise. But at the moment, I think it's probably still going to be not perhaps stillborn, perhaps a marker for the future. But I don't think he's going to have a breakthrough this time.
All right, he is an interesting character.
Absolutely, very, very interesting.
From Mark Hewitt, French fishermen prepare to block Calais to the Brits. This is a big story. The ports of Antwerp and Rotterdam must be licking their lips. This is a big story.
It is a big story, actually. I was wondering whether we get a question about it. And you absolutely, and I mean, utterly bizarre things. Macron sends the fleet, the actual French military fleet. Johnson retaliates by doing the same thing. It's all very bizarre. I think the important thing to understand is that it is Macron who is driving all of this. He's obviously under an awful lot of pressure. he senses that the election in 2022 is not going well, and he's now picked a fight with the old enemy, which is the British, about licensing and all of that. And you've got, you know, French fishing fleets trying to blockade Jersey, talk by Macron of cutting off electricity supplies to Britain, all that sort of thing. But yes, it is going to be, as you correctly say, the other European ports are going to do incredibly well, and we will definitely come to this topic in a video. I think we should do so quite soon, because it's certainly a subject to discuss, and to discuss a lot.
All right, let's do a few more super chats here. Magnesia Shad, my daughter's school did not skip a beat when they were allowed back on site. Basques and boundaries are military. Sometimes I think teachers are torturers in disguise. Teachers are torturers. That's interesting. Thank you very much for that. We got the same stuff here on this little island of Cyprus as well, the same exact scenario going on. From Refi 499, Anton Chetkid's rebuttal on the 1619 Project, Who We Are, America's Fight for Universal Progress from Franklin to Kennedy, Volume 1, 1750s to 1850s.
Yes, I mean, if I start talking about this 1619 project, I'll probably never finish. I mean, it's something that makes me so, well, I'm going to be careful what I say. But the whole thing is not history. It is something completely, it is unhistory, it's anti-history. And I haven't followed this, because anything to do with the 1619 project makes me frankly angry. Now, that's not to deny slavery or the slave trade or you know, discrimination or racism, all of that as part of the United States, but to recreate the whole narrative of American history around those things. Well, I mean, people, it seems to me, some people really do seem to hate their own country.
Yeah, that is true. From the English Loyalist, what I worry about is the Tories dithering the power they have gained and doing nothing like the Republicans under Trump.
Well, I mean,
Dogecoin to the moon. Right,
well, I said the real danger in this situation is that we will see a descent into Merkelism, and you know, the sort of system that Angela Merkel created in Germany, which is having all these dangerous consequences, in which, well, there's one dominant party, the CDU-CSU in that case, and we have a similarly dominant party in Britain with no real challenger to it, the Conservative Party, which will be tempted to rule Britain from the centre, or what he believes is the centre, and which will become complacent and lazy, and which will do nothing, and which will at the same time use its political heft to block alternatives out. And that is a real danger, I think. We'll see whether it happens. It'd be a very, very bad thing if it did.
Yeah. From the Big Red Bear, $5 super chat. The problem with Bitcoin is that it tends to rise and fall with the stock market. It seems to be just as artificial as everything else.
Well, Alex, I mean, this is more your territory than mine, I have to say. I mean, yeah.
It is compared against, just one quick thing I'll say. It is compared to the dollar as far as, you know, how many Bitcoins is equal to $1. People like to look at that metric, or how much Ether is equal to $1 or whatever. But there will come a day when we start to reframe the narrative and say, I bought this iPhone for, you know, 1 Ether, or I did this for X Dogecoin, like the previous super chat said, even though I'm not don't buy Dogecoin unless you like to gamble. But, you know, there will come a day where we actually start to look at services and goods and actually price them in terms of crypto. That's my belief. And then everything's going to change when that day comes. Right now, we still look at it in dollar and in euro terms for making it easy, just to make it easy to understand what's going on. We're still very early in all of this. Anyway, a couple more super chats. We'll get to some more calls and we'll wrap it up. Flying Boar says Russia needs to send Germany a message that it will sue if they canceled Nord Stream 2.
Oh, don't worry. They already have. They've said that in crystal clarity. Gazprom has said it, and various Russian officials have. And the Germans know. I mean, there's no question about it. And as I said, in answer to the previous questions, the Germans have actually admitted that there would be compensation claims, which would be difficult to defend. They've also admitted it to the US too, by the way. So, but certainly the Russians have certainly given that message very clearly.
All right, from Darren Alevi, do you think George Galloway Alliance for Unity is a great idea in Scotland and to spread out across the UK, an alliance of the left and the right?
I think it'll be very difficult to pull off across the UK because, again, I'm not sure that in England there's many people will perceive much of a need for it at the moment. Scotland is a different question, but even in Scotland, it's interesting that opposition to nationalism seems to be crystallizing around the Conservatives. That may leave in time an opening for a left-wing alternative in Scotland. Politics in Scotland are more to the left than those in the rest of the United Kingdom, or so it seems to me. But again, I think this is more for the future, not for the immediate term. Galloway, by the way, is a well-known person in Scotland, and I think I understand he's quite popular there.
All right, let's bring in a couple calls and we'll wrap it up. Zahir, are you ready? Are you ready to join us, Zahir? I'm going to bring you in. Let's give Zahir one more try.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Zahir. Good to have you.
Yeah,
How you
sorry,
doing?
my phone went down earlier.
How you doing?
I'm not too bad. Okay, there's a few things I want to talk about. This spat between Australia and China. Every day I hear that Australia is war, like drumming against China. I'm like, what's going on with that? I mean, and recently Australia tear down the Belt and Road thing. So will that affect China economically or what?
Well, we've done a program on it. We've done a program on precise. In fact, we've done 2 programs on this. I mean, I
coming
think,
up this weekend. The second
absolutely.
one.
So one about an Australian general, saying rather remarkable things about China, and the other about the Chinese, for their part, suspending indefinitely economic talks with Australia. So what is happening is that Australia has come under a lot of pressure from the US to realign with the US in the US confrontation with China. And the result is that the Chinese have come after Australia in a very, very, very big way. And it seems to me that they are trying basically to push Australia so hard as to intimidate others in the Pacific that might be thinking of following where Australia is going. And it seems to be working, by the way. I mean, New Zealand, as we discussed in this program, seems to be taking a more emollient attitude towards China. And there was an utterly fascinating editorial in Global Times, which is the Chinese Communist Party's semi-official newspaper, which is published in English, which came out shortly after Alex and I did a video in which we talked about Chinese foreign policy. And Alex, over the course of that video, was making the point that the Chinese seem to be out to unpick, deconstruct the US's various alliances. And to my astonishment, I was reading exactly this thing in these very words in this very same editorial. It actually says that the Chinese, China and Russia, but especially it essentially means China. China is in a much stronger position to deconstruct the US's alliances than the US is able to deconstruct China's. So that seems to be what this is all about. In other words, Australia is showing loyalty to the US, is being punished for doing so by China, and is being punished in a way that is intended to deter others.
No, I mean, the thing is, first Australia, like, doing all this moves against China, and then it expect that China should not do anything. You cannot have it both ways. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're gonna harm other countries' interests, then that country will retaliate. Then,
well, I think that is true, but bear in mind that for much of the post-war era, because the Western powers were so much stronger, they didn't think they needed to make those kind of trade-offs. They thought they could have it both ways. So a country like Australia 20 years ago might have felt that, you know, China was in a weaker position 30 years ago, and needed Australia. And now what they're discovering is that, of course, China doesn't, or at least not to anything like the same degree. And that may be what has changed, and it may be what the Australians didn't expect and are now discovering. So I get the sense with the Western powers, with many Western politicians, that they're becoming increasingly dismayed that the Chinese, and indeed the Russians too, are pushing back on them, against them, in ways that they've not been used to before. I mean, the West is very accustomed to sanctioning others. Being sanctioned itself is not something it has ever really experienced, and it is something of a shock, I think.
Yeah, well, that and this I don't know if I can talk about this or not, but this CV situation in India, it's getting really worse, and I heard that Russia has sent some CV shots to India. So
yeah, it's true.
Okay, that and because how's the relationship between Russia and India? Were they down or what?
Well, they used to be, of course, in the 60s and 70s, extremely close. And at that time, I think there was even a time when Russia was India's biggest trading partner, and certainly it was its biggest supplier of weapons and technology. Well, those days are long gone, and I think the two countries are friendly towards each other, and Russia still remains a significant arms supplier to India, but the relationship is a shadow of what it used to be. So they're friendly, but they're not especially close.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that and of course this Nord Stream 2 thing. I mean, Germany would be, if Germany would be wiser and smarter, they should build this thing. Yes, they'll face pressure, but because it would be stupid of them for abandoning it and then, you know, compensating Russia way more. You know
I think they do intend to build it. This is my own personal view. I mean, I heard what Claude has to say about this, but I think the Germans ultimately will build it for all the reasons you said. But it's also very important for Germany because Angela Merkel, as always, committed Germany to a carbon-free future without nuclear power. That created a major problem for Germany, because how is it going to achieve those targets given that alternative energies are still some way from full development, if we ever even get there? So, of course, she had no real option but to turn to the Russians and import natural gas from them, because natural gas is a much lower carbon footprint than coal or oil do. And that was why the Germans went to the Russians to ask the Russians to build Nord Stream 2. And that reality, Germany's commitments, carbon commitments, and at the same time its need for cheap energy if it is to remain competitive, that hasn't changed. And that still argues, to my mind, very strongly the need for Nord Stream 2. So I think the Germans will do it.
And thing with the Ukraine, I don't understand. What if European Union really want Ukraine for? I mean, Russia, it has everything, natural resources, minerals, all stuff they need.
Yeah.
And not just that, Russia has the passage through Asia via air, land, and sea. Why are they ruining their relationship with Russia over Ukraine, which they can't see? Since 2014 till now, European Union Germany spent so much money on Ukraine. What have they got in return?
Well, nothing.
And Ukraine should look at Greece, a member of EU.
Yeah.
Germany didn't spend money on them. You think Germany gonna spend money on Ukraine? I don't think so.
Well, Zahir, you ought to be giving advice to both the people in Brussels and to the people in Kiev, because what you say makes complete sense. But the reality is that
I don't get it.
the reason they made that great, the Europeans made that great play in Ukraine, not just the Europeans, also the US neocons, people like Victoria Nuland, was because, well, first of all, they were eyeing the base that the Russians have in Sevastopol, and they wanted to push the Russians out of that, and they was eyeing the pipelines that crisscross Ukraine, carry the gas from Russia, and they were also thinking, well, you know, if we can sort of gain control of Ukraine, that will weaken Putin, prevent the Russians from consolidating their Eurasian Economic Union, and they would achieve all these objectives. And who knows, it might even precipitate a political crisis in Moscow. That was their plan, because it all fell completely apart. The Russians held on to their base, took Crimea. They're building Nord Stream 2. They built Turk Stream. They're building pipelines to China. So all the pipelines crisscrossing Ukraine are losing all their utility. And far from Ukraine being a challenge to Russia, it has been in crisis ever since. So it was a ploy, a plan, a regime change operation, if you like, that failed. But that's the kind of thing that neocons do. They play chess games which never work out for them. But they never seem to learn from that.
Well, they do all get promoted.
Neocons are not good at chess. Let's just say that.
No.
Well, and the thing is, but at least Germany should have vetoed this thing. I don't understand. Like,
well, of course she should. Of course she should.
It's not just that Ukraine. Okay, if I'm Ukrainian, I would look at Greece. The money that they spend on Ukraine. If Merkel would have spent all that money in Greece, they would have built a statue of Merkel in Greece right now. In Athens, next to Alexander the Great.
Well, I have to say actually that the calamity in Greece in terms of sheer amounts of funds thrown away actually dwarfs even Ukraine, which is saying something. But can I just also say something? You're absolutely right. Merkel should have been the person to put a stop to the whole thing. She should have come along and said to all those people, Victoria Nuland, Carl Bildt, Radek Sikorski, all these strange people who were pursuing this Ukrainian project, and to the Ukrainians themselves, the people in Ukraine who were thinking that they would join the entire European Union, she should have said to them, no, absolutely not. We're not going there. This is completely contrary to Europe's interests, to Germany's interests. It will create a crisis between us and Russia, which is in no one's interests. And it fell to her to put a stop to it. Other German leaders would have done that. Helmut Kohl, Helmut Schmidt, you name them, Schroeder, they would have said absolutely not. Merkel didn't. Because Merkel's whole strategy is that she never stops anything. She waits and then tries to exploit it politically to her own advantage.
But she failed miserably.
Well, she failed miserably in terms of Europe and Germany. You can't say that she failed for herself, because she managed that way to keep her position with the neocons. You know, they were happy with her. And at the same time, she remained Chancellor of Germany. So from Merkel's point of view, she would say it was successful. Because her measure of success is not what's good for Germany or Europe. It's what works for her and for her friends.
Yeah, but the thing is, Merkel should have seen what happened in Georgia 2008. She should have known that this is a red line for Russia. Ukraine is a staunch red line. She should have known. She's seen that. I don't know who advised her, but he didn't, or the intelligence. Maybe she got the bad intelligence or what. But really, it was an absolute debacle right there. And not just that. You think Merkel's gonna give €1 to Ukraine when she didn't give one dime to Greece? And if she would have spent all that money on the money that she spent on Ukraine. If she would give that money to Greece, her statue would be in Athens right next to Alexander the Great.
Well, Zahir, in fact, lots of money has gone to Ukraine from all sorts of sources, including from Germany, by the way.
But they've all made money. And everyone that was including the big guy, and everyone knows who I mean, the big guy and his son. They've all made money from Ukraine. There were people in Germany who made a lot of money in Ukraine. There were people in France that made a lot of money in Ukraine, and there were people who made a lot of money off of what happened in Greece as well.
And you know
a
what?
lot of money. So Merkel did her job in a way. In a way, she did her job, and she made a lot of people very, very rich. And Alexander Victoria Nuland, I believe, is now the second most powerful person in the State Department.
Absolutely.
So, you know.
So, I mean, from the point of view of these people, they've done very well out of this affair. Now, Ukraine obviously has been absolutely smashed. European relations with Russia have been smashed, which is something, by the way, that they welcome. Russian attempts to consolidate the Eurasian Economic Community were thrown back some years. I mean, they will say that, they achieved a lot of what they wanted. They didn't get Sevastopol, which I suspect they wanted. They didn't get control of the pipelines, which I suspect they wanted. But I can't say that from their perspective, this has been such a great failure. I think they would say, on the contrary, up to now, it's been a success. From this point on, with, the pipelines, Nord Stream 2 being made, with China and Russia forging their alliance ever closer, with the real threat of a war in Ukraine, which Ukraine would lose, the calculus perhaps starts to change. But up to now, they've had no real reason to change their policy, because from their point of view, it's worked.
Yeah, Zahir, people in East Ukraine suffered. People in Ukraine suffered.
14,000 people died.
Families were torn apart. People in Greece suffered. People lost everything in Greece. People committed suicide because of the devastation. Yeah. But don't think for a second that these neocons and these globalists and these nutcases didn't do their job and didn't do a good job. Look, Hunter Biden went from being a board member of Burisma to now being untouchable and the president's son. Yeah. He did great. He did super. And he's living a charmed life.
Okay, two more things I want to talk about. It's about Ukraine. If I am Putin, right, you know what I should do? I should basically let European Union and the West knows that, just kind of tease them that, you know what, if you're gonna be hard on me, I might just sign a military deal with China. Just as he can use this as a leverage against the West. Basically saying, if you're gonna pressure me, I might just sign this military agreement with China, which will then, you know what I mean? He should tease that. He should play politics.
No, well, yeah, I know, but that's not going to happen, because firstly, the Chinese would never agree to that. And I mean, he doesn't exercise that kind of control. So it's the kind of play that he's really beyond him. And Erdogan, up to a certain point, can do it. But
yeah, Erdogan can do it. So should Putin.
Yeah. But
one more thing I want to talk about. You see the Nord Stream 2 that they're building? You know, the gas pipeline that they had through Ukraine. See, all the gas was going to Europe, and the money Ukraine was making from Russia was going to, guess who? Hunter Biden and all of them. Don't you think?
Well, what was actually happening was that gas was flowing from Russia to Europe. Ukrainian oligarchs would siphon it off, and then resell it to Europe at higher prices, because Russian gas was sold to Ukraine at lower prices than it was sold on the international market. Then along comes Mr. Putin, and he says, I don't like this arrangement anymore. It isn't really working. Ukraine from now on pays the market price for gas. And that's one reason why so many people in Ukraine, in the oligarch class, are so hostile to Putin, because from their point of view, he put an end to what had been a very lucrative racket. So just bear that in mind.
So basically, Hunter Biden and all these neocons made money off Russian gas.
Well, they made money out of Russian gas, and they made money out of Ukrainians too, because of course the other game you play is that you buy cheap gas from Russia and you resell it to Ukrainians also at a very high price.
What the hell? Ukraine doesn't have money, doesn't have anything in their country. what are they gonna export? How are they gonna make money? I'm
Well,
surprised this.
well, Ukraine could actually be a very rich country. It has some of the most fertile land on earth. It is extremely productive, or could be extremely productive agriculturally. And though it was very, very run down, it did also include a large part of the Soviet Union's industrial base. So it produced gas turbines, rocket engines, aircraft engines, all kinds of things. Steel pipes, you name it. It had both an industrial sector and an agricultural sector, but all of that has been completely disorganized.
And one more thing about Ukraine. If I'm Putin, I should let China, sanction Ukraine just to send a message to the European Union.
Yeah.
You want Ukraine? Here, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
if China sanctioned Ukraine would be a mess, and I don't think EU wants anything to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, I ought to say that in fact, what has happened up to recently has been rather the opposite. China, on the contrary, has been a major investor in Ukraine and has bought, to an extent that anybody does, has bought industrial products from Ukraine. I mean, they buy gas turbines from there, which they then take to China and copy and then make themselves and improve upon. And I've heard rumors, which I can't confirm, that one of the reasons why Chinese aircraft carrier developments have been so rapid is because they bought in Ukraine all the plans and all the sort of know-how that the Soviet Union had assembled together in the late 1970s to build its own aircraft carriers, which were due to be built over the course of the 1980s. And of course, the Chinese did actually buy a former Soviet aircraft carrier that had been left in Ukraine. So the Chinese are big players economically in Ukraine. And the reality of the Russian-Chinese relationship is that up to now, certainly, and probably still, the Russians can't just pick up the telephone to the Chinese and say, can you stop? Because the Chinese will say, sorry, we understand that you've got concerns with Ukraine, but we have our own interests.
Because Ukraine has been a thorn in the side of the EU and the Russia. It's been a thorn in the side. And,
well, true.
And Europe just made a big mistake, just picking fights with Russia over Ukraine. Doesn't make any sense.
That is absolutely true. I mean, the Europeans shot themselves in the foot. If you're talking about Europe, I mean, some of the people who are involved, as I said, the Radek Sikorski and Carl Bildt and Merkel and all of that lot, they did fine from it. And a lot of European business people who went to, if you can call them business people, carpetbaggers who went to Ukraine, they've done very well too. And those sort of people have done well. But Europe as a whole has not done well. But coming back to questions that we repeatedly deal with on our programs, since when have European leaders acted with European interests, the real European interests, in mind? If they had, the kind of structure of economic monetary union that we've seen in Europe would never have been established. So let's be very realistic about the sort of people we're talking about.
And one more thing, remember in the Maidan there was this fella named Vitaly Klitschko, the heavyweight boxer.
No, he's still there.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell his job is, because
he's mayor of Kiev.
Well, he's absolutely useless because his party lost in the election.
Yeah.
Basically, he's a carpetbagger. That's what he is. He spent all his life in Germany, and now he wants to run for office in Ukraine. And plus, his kids live in Miami. Talk about
I don't know anything about that. But as I said,
you can look at it. You can do a research.
He was for a time the person who was expected to become believe it or not, the president of Ukraine, and there was an awful lot of expectations about this, but it never quite materialized. But as I say, certainly he was mayor of Kiev for a long time. I think he still is. I've not heard that he's not.
Well, and what's the recent update on Russia and the SWIFT banking? Are they
on the what?
SWIFT bank, Russia and the SWIFT bank.
I think at the moment the Russians have been talking about it becoming hypothetical, but I think they are increasingly confident that if they are cut off, and I think they expect that one day they will be, they already have enough fallback systems ready that they can run with it quite easily. So they've already got an alternative backup system to enable transfers to take place between Russian banks within Russia. They don't use SWIFT, or at least they don't need to use SWIFT for that anymore. They also have interbank payment systems now organized or being organized with China, to some extent, apparently even with Japan, Turkey, within the Eurasian Union that they've been busy setting up. So they think they can absorb it. We'll see whether it happens.
How will Russia retaliate if they get cut off?
Well, they will retaliate by doing all the things that we've talked about. I mean, they will retaliate in whatever way they consider just. I mean, I don't know what their plans are, but I think that they are talking with increasing confidence that they can withstand this. It would have been a disaster for them if it had been done 7 years ago, but they've now evolved to the point where they can absorb it.
Anyways, all right, that's all I want to talk about, and hopefully.
Okay.
See you guys next week then.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you, Zahir.
Super chat from Darren. Would you guys be able to add an Estonian flag option to the Duran shop? Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
We will add that for sure. Let's bring in Alexandre and we will wrap it up. We will wrap it all up with Alexandre. Alexandre, how are you?
Hey guys, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, so just a quick question. Quick thing. One guy was asking about the whole hacking with the Bitcoin thing. I just want to kind of correct that. It wasn't actually Bitcoin that got hacked. It's the on-ramp and the off-ramps that have been getting hacked, or the wallets, which is like a whole different thing. Each company have their own take on what is a secure wallet, what is their own little technology. So it's not the actual protocol. You can't actually hack Bitcoin unless either you have 50% of all the mining computers in the world, and you have to beat them constantly. So you're playing the lottery and you have to get 50% of the mining computers in the world. Or you have a quantum computer, which I'm sorry, as a person who kind of is in the field of this, I don't actually think quantum computers are actually that real from my own research. I think it's more of a marketing term than really anything else. Because if quantum computing was real, we would see a lot more evidence of it. We would see hacks galore. Bitcoin would have been taken down long ago. I mean, all these different amazing things would have been solved and gone. I mean, but I think it's just more marketing. Number two, so yeah, I think I don't know if you, Alex, I guess, remembers me. I'm actually Russian myself. I just kind of noticed that like the switch from Russia to China, very sudden in terms of like the hatred. I mean, like I'm getting jealous here. Like this is quite interesting. I mean, and on top of that, I don't usually watch Sky News Australia. I mean, I find their content pretty interesting at times, but I went on there recently and oh my God, have they just brought out every saber they can rattle. It's amazing. And I don't know. I mean, I get it. I get it from their point of view, especially if you're Australian, you're like, your country's about the size of California. You have, you know, I get that, you know, you would be much more aggressive than America is. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what side to, I'm not ever going to pick sides on this one, but I'm not really sure what to kind of go off. I see a lot of hypocrisy on the way they're like handling the situation. There was oh, well, I mean, it's amazing. They're not letting America in certain South China seaports. I mean, well, yeah, it's kind of the coast, is it not? I love that. I love that whole thing. And I guess now the question I have for you guys is, I was on a channel on Telegram and I just found this random bit of news is that apparently the Turks are messing with the Greek border. But this was the interesting part that I found was that they're messing with Finnish and Swedish patrolling boats that are patrolling the Greek border.
I must say, well, gosh, I mean, I didn't know that, but things. We live in interesting times.
Erdogan's in big trouble from the latest polls that I've been seeing.
I agree. Yes.
Reliable polls in Turkey,
Yes.
reliable
Yes.
polls in Turkey
Yes.
have him really down.
Yes, there is. I think he is in big trouble, and there is always a sure sign that Erdogan is in trouble and knows that he is in trouble, which is that he picks up the telephone and talks to Putin. And that's exactly what he did. Whenever he's in trouble on any reason, he comes and talks to Putin about this. I think the Russians, by the way, are absolutely sick of Erdogan by now, as pretty much everybody is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just quite interesting. I don't know. I found it interesting that there's Finnish and Swedish boats patrolling the Greek border. It's kind of surprising. I don't know what to say.
Nothing surprises me anymore. I mean, the world has become so complicated that it's just incredible. I mean, I would point out Sweden. Did you say Finland and Sweden? I mean, I think, if I'm right, neither country is in NATO, for example. So what exactly are they doing? No, I think not.
Well, there
might be some European.
European project of some kind.
And it might actually have something to do with migration and migrants and stuff like that. That would be my guess.
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
Maybe Erdogan is kind of screwing around with them there. Yeah. Maybe trying to send a message to Merkel.
Mm.
It's truly a wondrous little predicament. I mean, the whole entire thing is wrong. Great being protected by Swedish and Finnish patrolling boats against Turkey. It's a word salad altogether. But it's a fun time. But
that it is, and there's no doubt that Erdogan, if it does have anything to do with migration, there's no doubt that Erdogan would like to be up to some mischief to, of course, try to get money from Germany and from Merkel. At the end of the day, that's what he needs. He needs money, and he needs money fast.
You're right. And I guess the last thing I do want to say before I go, it is quite interesting. I don't know, especially for Alex, Christopher. You've heard about the news of how Turkey recently got really frauded in the crypto market. This one fellow got away with billions of dollars. He just went up and left. I genuinely I don't know, before I'd be laughing, but now I just feel bad for Turks because this is they're screwed either way. I mean, they don't have an economic off ramp, I guess, if you think about it. And most they have gold. And even then I don't know what they're gonna do with it. I mean, they would have had crypto, but that was been taken out. That's a scary situation to be in. I don't know.
I think Alexander could probably answer this better, but my take on this, Alexandre, is that it's not about crypto for me. What Erdogan did by trying to ban people from putting their money into their lira into crypto exchanges. It's just Erdogan is just looking to get himself out of a big economic hole, and he doesn't want people to take out their cash from the bank. Period. Not gold, not stocks, not crypto, nothing. And the fact that he's going after crypto shows how desperate he is. I think.
Absolutely. I entirely agree with that. It's exactly my view too. I think this is the situation that exists in Turkey now, that he's trying to control. He's using what Russians would call administrative measures to deal with an economic situation. I mean, Russians are very familiar with that sort of thing.
Oh yes, but we actually are good at it. That's the difference.
You're good at it. Well, that is right.
Yeah. I guess it's quite an interesting time. So, anyways, thank you guys so much. You guys put on a wonderful show. And last thing, just kind of as a tip, Alex, I've been on the Telegram for the Duran and all that. I haven't been on it recently. The reason why is because I noticed you were using your Telegram channel as more of a notification for your YouTube videos. I think you should try to use it more as a Twitter than anything. I mean, it's definitely that place. Maybe open up the comment section, all that kind of stuff, because there's a lot in this, especially your own channel who's on Telegram. There's so many channels that I follow for news, world geopolitics, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you should definitely try to switch that around a bit, because I would love to have a conversation there and all that. So
I agree. I agree with you, and we'll get on it. All right. Thank you, Alexandre. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, Alexander, I think we've got everything.
We've done everything. Wow.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me just do one quick check here. Anatoly sent us 179 rubles. Thank you very much, Anatoly, for that. Flying Boar, a couple of super chats here. Update on Idlib in Syria.
Yes, more fighting apparently, or at least more bombing by the Russians, and that's almost certainly one topic of Erdogan's conversation with Putin. In fact, I understand that Putin raised the situation in Idlib with Erdogan. So I understand that Idlib is almost on the point of, has been for some time now, on the point of collapse. There's most of the jihadis are now strung out along the Turkish border. They still control Idlib city and a couple of villages and places like that, but they are increasingly finding it difficult to hold on. And the economic crisis, which was imposed, which has been, manufactured in Syria through the Caesar sanctions, has apparently hit Idlib particularly hard, which is ironic in some ways. And even though the economic crisis in the rest of Syria is abating, it apparently remains terrible in Idlib itself.
All right, and the final super chat here is from Flying Boar. EU is hurting more by Russia's counter-sanctions. Why the EU still going with this policy?
Because they don't know better. I mean, think about it. I mean, when has the EU ever reversed course on a policy that fails? That's not what they do. What they do instead is that they put their foot even further down on the accelerator, even as the cliff appears on the horizon. I mean, that's always what they do. So I don't think they have any idea about how to change this. I mean, at the very least, ending that policy, that sanctions policy, would be an admission of failure. And that's something that they are incapable of doing.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. Great stream. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen, once again for all the help and for moderating. The great Spartan Warrior Queen. Big thank you to you. Thank you to everyone that sent us super chats, and your questions were fantastic. Everyone that was on the chat and all your comments as well. Thank you to all our extremely intelligent and bright callers. You guys made this show really fun. And Alexander, any final words? Any latest updates on election results? And
we're still getting results trickling in, and the picture seems to be getting, if anything, worse for Labour. But the most interesting thing is that it seems that Starmer has given an absolutely disastrous interview with Lara Kunsberg of the BBC. She's a rather clever, but frankly rather treacherous interviewer. Many people dislike her for all sorts of reasons, which I'm not going to discuss now. But anyway, it was apparently a disastrous interview. And though his team at the beginning of the day were trying to put the best gloss on everything, it seems that's all beginning to frazzle. And there's now finally talk that perhaps it's time for Starmer to move on and to make way for someone else. The trouble is...
The fall of Starmer, you mean?
The fall of Starmer,
exactly. Maybe his knockout blow.
Exactly. The trouble is, and this comes back directly to the point that was made to us by one of our questioners over the course of a program. Starmer goes, who do you put in his place? I mean, I just don't see anybody. I don't see any person in the Labour Party who is in a position at the moment to turn things round.
Can Corbyn come back, or is that possible?
Well, I don't think so. But even if Corbyn did come back, I mean, I don't see how that would solve this set of problems. I mean, he was popular in 2017. He's still popular with many people. Perhaps he's more popular with more people than Starmer is, but he certainly isn't in a position, it seems to me, to reach out to many of the people Labour is losing. In fact, I can easily see how bringing Corbyn back would make things worse. But in any event, I just don't think that's what he wants to do. And I don't think it's what's going to happen. Bear in mind, he's not even a Labour MP now. He's still an MP, but Starmer booted him out of the parliamentary party. A mistake, by the way, in my opinion. Whatever you think of Corbyn, doing that undoubtedly demoralised a part of the party's activists. So, whatever, I can't see what Labour can do to turn things round. At this moment in time, it seems to me that this is a party that has no answers to the problems it's facing.
Yeah. All right. have a great weekend as well. I got a message from Zariel. Have a great weekend as well. And we have one final super chat. Actually, we did a video on this. So Flying Boar says an update on EU and China trade deal. We have a video coming up for this, don't we?
We do. We absolutely do.
So stay tuned this weekend, Flying Boar. We do a pretty deep dive into what's going on between EU and China. And you'll like the video as well. Thank you for the super chat. And we'll end it there. Alexander, we will end it there. And that's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. What else? Super U, Locals, and Odyssey. Super U, Locals, and Odyssey. You'll find those links down below. Duran Shop, 10% off. Use the code REALNEWS at checkout. Take care, everybody.